Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the library. We had interesting moments just before the stream, setting up, getting ready, opening up the end part of Frankenstein to be read. And so I find places online that host these novels, this literature live. So it's the internet, right? The always reliable. The server's down. The server is like, it's one of those cloud for messages, right? It's not your internet connection. It's not a firewall. Oh, the actual server, it's a 500 plus. It's a 500 error, right? Which implies that the service or the server hosting the thing you're doing is actually off. It's not responding. It's not some other issue. So I told Velana, hey Velana, it broken. And then I think we both went looking for it. And then she found it in like 3 seconds. And I'm like fussing with search strings in my browser. Coming up with like, no, I don't want a YouTube video. No, I don't want like a review, or I don't want to buy it because it's public domain. It's free. There are places that will just give it to you. You are a good manager. Yes, good work, manager. Good work, a good manager. You get a 5% hike in your salary. Thank you. Most excellent salary hike. Yes. Oh, I've been playing Can You Imagine with StreamerBot all over again. Many times. It turns out, it's don't. I mean, that's a generous salary increase for a single night of work. Not even a whole, like 5 minutes. It didn't take you 2 minutes to do it. So, yeah, be happy with that. Let's see. Last time on Sidoen Games is I had a marker command that Velana could use to add a marker to my stream, both the Twitch stream and my local recording. These markers are very good for video editing. They put little flags or little arrows all throughout your recording that you can see. That you can just hop to them. Go, oh yeah, cool. That was a moment that we decided it might be good for remembering, clipping, or like cutting out if there's a break, that kind of stuff. So very useful. I have a lot of those automatically added in by StreamerBot, so like such things like scene changes. So if you've watched one of my previous streams, you may have heard me probably complain about, oh, how I just went to the Just Talking stream from the starting soon screen and I forgot to add a marker. So now I have to look at like the audio waveform because the transition, the page flipping transition plays an audio, and that shows up in a very distinct pattern on the video recording. Hasn't been the most alarming thing for me to address. Well, now I have a marker, and those worked really well. We give them custom names, they show up, I can find them, and we're flying. Well, the marker command I parsed the wrong variable. So now all of the markers that Velana posted for the last 2 gaming streams with Dune all say input 0 or user. It was one of those 2. I think it says user rather than input 0 or whatever it is. It's not the word she provided. It's the name of a variable. So I fixed that. Totally is fixed. Can't go wrong or be broken. Velana, why don't you try that? like even if we don't use a marker for the rest of the stream, let's just do a test marker, and I'll be able to see when I edit tonight. Yeah, mark test. There we go. I will see that. Hopefully, it'll say test. I messed around with the auto shoutouts so much, and I tested them and retested them. If the stream were live, a lot of people I don't know would have been shouted out. I hope they did. I hope that doesn't show up in their activity feeds. Oh well, whatever. Hopefully that works now. So if someone shows up whom we have on a list, like a friend or something, I haven't populated the list yet. So there's still some work to be done. They go on a list and then they'll be automatically shouted out. If a whole bunch of people show up at once, we can queue them all up. And because Twitch has a 60-second timer or a cooldown for its native shoutout command, then StreamerBot will queue these up and we'll play them one at a time I have it set to 61 seconds in case there's a little bit of input lag between my systems and the Twitch servers. Wow, Vlana, you're quite sane. Mind you, that's just what Gwen says. So that's cool. That's awesome. And of course, Vlana can do a shout out, and in the same fashion. Now for the auto shout outs, I'm going to sort of later on, I will include sort of something for raids as well. That shouldn't be too hard to add in here the way I have it formatted. Most of the work was about modularizing. So the actual command to send messages and shout out commands is in one action, which then gets called by other actions which format the data appropriately. Because a manual shout out and like an automated shout out from like first words or perhaps a raid, they use different variables, and this was fouling me up a lot beforehand. So I had to fix that. Like, you know, Vlad, I do have an ellipsis emote. I think you might wish to use it. You seem to be dotting a lot. You should see a doctor about that. Yeah. It's your helpful advice from your husband. I've rejiggered the quote system. I still have to re-add the quotes. I still have them recorded in Stream Elements. They're now happening in StreamerBot. And I think I want to be put a little more care towards the occasional time someone was quoted as the speaker of the quote versus just who put the quote in, and then the time perhaps. I think that's in more detail in Stream Elements. I can look that up. So I want to do that as well. Yeah. But yeah, and we have the app thing working great, and I think I fixed up Stream Elements. There was one more spot where it had to be sort of unchecked, so it shouldn't yell at the same time that Gwen does whenever ads start showing up and becoming a thing. And yeah, cool beans. Today, we are reading I thought it was the last 5, but it looks like it's the last 4 chapters, chapters 21 to 24 of Frankenstein. So we've come a long way. We've gone through phases of listening to Victor be a sap, be what's an offensive term for a pansy nobleman who thinks all the world floats around himself or revolves around themselves. He's a clown. It's not the right word, but it's okay. He's a freaking clown. Despise the person. Then we had the perspective of the creature. Self-centered fop. Yeah, that's good. That's pretty close. Self-centered fop. And we sort of got a sense of how time flows in the period in which this book was written. The amount of time it takes to travel from A to B. In today's world would be like an afternoon drive or perhaps a day trip in a car. Took months to journey back in the days. And then like the fops, they would travel so slowly, so much in luxury and comfort, presumably, that the likely underpaid messengers of the day could catch up to them, even though they were rushing from one spot to the next with their letters and their correspondence. Eventually, we moved on to the creature, Frankenstein's monster. And we got a sort of a summary catch-up of its experience from birth until the moment it met Victor in the icy mountains. I think they were icy. Very, very cold and dangerous terrain. That's the only place he could find safety and seclusion from the horrible beast that is humankind. He makes a deal with Victor, and Victor goes off procrastinating this deep dark charge of his to make the creature a mate, a companion to spend its days with. Comes up with excuses. Oh, these creatures will go on murderous rampages and be terrible, awful things perhaps, and you don't have any guarantees that you won't be a horrible person. The reality is the creature is more human than I think Victor would dare even consider, or dare to think to consider just how human its responses are. It was made various perfect images of humanity. There's a bit of a mismatch there. He's a puzzle piece, but but he was he grew up without any sort of guidance and taught himself everything and learned from his through his own experience. He was dealing with emotions of rage and hurt and betrayal and didn't know appropriate ways to deal with them. You could say, in a sense, that the creature is more the victim, even though it is also responsible for the deaths of two humans in this story. Not that the human justice system did anything whatsoever to help resolve the issue appropriately. Victor certainly believing he knew the truth, and he did know the truth, but he didn't really have cause to know the truth. It was pure discrimination and his own biases that fed that fed his beliefs. He did nothing. He came up with excuses. Truly, Victor is the monster. In the end, Victor, nearing completion of his duties after finally capitulating to responsibility and going about doing his duty, convinced himself, like I said, that this was a bad idea, and destroyed his work whilst the Frankenstein's monster watched. He became very angry. He roared for vengeance, and then instead of attacking Victor, ran off. That's kind of his way, isn't it? The creature's way. He has not been given a name, which bothers me. I keep calling him the monster, the creature, Frankenstein's monster, but really, Frankenstein abdicated that role. He disowned the creature. Not really Frankenstein's monster anymore, in that respect. Frankenstein, Victor, he packed up all his stuff. He was about to leave. He went out on a lake in a boat to dispose of the remains of his work, such that no one would dare find them again. No one would be able to discover what he was working on and accuse him of the evils for which he believes he has committed. And indeed, lots of people would say, "Hey, yeah, you dug up a bunch of corpses and then you stitched them together. Yep, it's pretty macabre. You're pretty gross." And you imagine the era of the superstition. So he'd probably get into a lot of trouble for that. But he was washed out to the ocean or the sea. He fell asleep in the boat. I don't know why you would do that. That seems really dumb to me. And then he sort of drifted with the tide or the wind. He cannot say, for he woke up in the middle of the waters with no familiar land in sight. Eventually, he drifted close to shore. He paddled over there, starving and dying of thirst. Landed to discover a town rather hostile to his presence. I believe we left Victor last time as he was being escorted to the magistrate to discover the situation he found himself in. I believe, as Valana mentioned last time, that the creature's machinations may be afoot, maybe to blame for what's happening in Victor's near future. I have taken my vocal sprays. Let us go to our reading room, conclude the story. Yes, my book. Notice how the book remains the same, despite the internet's attempts to subvert me. You know what? The internet probably just wants me to play Space Marine or Dune. I don't blame it. Those are good games. Okay, take another sip and get ready to go. Right. I moved all my bits. Here we go. Chapter 21. I was soon introduced into the presence of the magistrate, an old benevolent man with calm and mild manners. He looked upon me, however, with some degree of severity, and then, turning towards my conductors, he asked who appeared as witnesses on this occasion. I'm just going to shuffle this over here, I think. Yep, all right. About half a dozen men came forward, and, one being selected by the magistrate, he deposed that he had been out fishing the night before with his son and brother-in-law, Daniel Nugent. Nugent? Nougat. When, about 10 o'clock, they observed a strong northerly blast arising. They had accordingly put in for port. It was a very dark night, as the moon had not yet risen. Yet they did not land at the harbor, but, as they had been accustomed, at a creek about 2 miles below. He walked on first, carrying a part of the fishing tackle, and his companions followed him at some distance. As he was proceeding along the sands, he struck his foot against something and fell at his length on the ground. His companions came up to assist him, and by the light of their lantern, they found that he had fallen on the body of a man who was to all appearance dead. Their first supposition was that it was the corpse of some person who had been drowned and was thrown on shore by the waves, but on examination they found that the clothes were not wet, and even that the body was not then cold. They instantly carried it to the cottage of an old woman near the spot, and endeavored, but in vain, to restore it to life. It appeared to be a handsome young man, about 25 years of age. He had apparently been strangled, for there was no sign of any violence except the black mark of fingers on his neck. We've seen that before. The first part of this disposition did not in the least interest me, but when the mark of the fingers was mentioned, I remembered the murder of my brother, and felt myself extremely agitated. My limbs trembled, and a mist came over my eyes, which obliged me to lean on a chair for support. The magistrate observed me with a keen eye, and of course drew an unfavorable augury from my manner. Imagine distress being the emotion that convicts you. The son confirmed his father's account, but when Daniel Nugent was called, he swore positively that just before the fall of his companion, he saw a boat with a single man in it at a short distance from the shore, and as far as he could judge by the light of a few stars, it was the same boat in which I had just landed. Oh man, I imagine the boats were very similar back then. But, I wouldn't really know, I guess. A woman deposed that she lived near the beach and was standing at the door of her cottage, waiting for the return of the fishermen, about an hour before she heard of the discovery of the body. When she saw a boat with only one man in it push off from that part of the shore where the corpse was afterwards found. Another woman confirmed the account of the fishermen, having brought the body into her house. It was not cold. They put it into a bed and rubbed it, and Daniel went to the town for an apothecary, but life was quite gone. Keep being distracted. I need to read. It's not nearly undistracting enough. Don't mind me as I go about subtly adjusting everything I'm doing in my layout of all the stuff and things just to cover my face. There we go. I'm distracting me. I'm very handsome. All right, life was quite gone. Several other men examined concerning my landing, and they agreed that with the strong north wind that had arisen during the night, it was very probable that I had beaten about for many hours and had been obliged to return nearly to the same spot from which I had departed. Besides, they observed that it appeared that I had brought the body from another place, and it was likely that I did not appear to know the shore. I might have put into the harbor, ignorant of the distance of the town from the place where I had deposited the corpse. Apparently the town is called ... Yes, it's all one straight line. Mr. Kirwin, on hearing this evidence, desired that I should be taken into the room where the body lay for interment, that it might be observed what effect the sight it would produce upon me. This idea was probably suggested by the extreme agitation I had exhibited when the mode of the murder had been described. I was accordingly conducted by the magistrate and several other persons to the inn. I could not help being struck by the strange coincidence that had taken place during this eventful night. But knowing that I had been conversing with several persons in the island, sorry, I keep partially hiccuping. But knowing that I had been conversing with several persons in the island I had inhabited about the time that the body had been found, I was perfectly tranquil as to the consequences of the affair. I entered the room where the corpse lay and was led up to the coffin. How can I describe my sensations on beholding it? I feel yet parched with horror, nor can I reflect on that terrible moment without shuddering in agony. The examination, the presence of the magistrate and the witnesses, passed like a dream from my memory when I saw the lifeless form of Henry Clerval stretched before me. I gasped for breath, and throwing myself on the body, I exclaimed, "Have my murderous machinations deprived you also, my dearest Henry, of life? 2 have I already destroyed, yet other victims await their destiny. But you, Clerval, my friend, my benefactor." The human frame could no longer support the agonies that I endured, and I was carried out of the room in strong convulsions. A fever succeeded to this. I lay for 2 months on the point of death. My ravings, as I afterwards heard, were frightful. I called myself the murderer of William, of Justin, and of Clerval. Sometimes I entreated my attendants to assist me in the destruction of the fiend by whom I was tormented, and at others I felt the fingers of the monster already grasping my neck, and screamed aloud with agony and terror. Fortunately, as I spoke my native language, Mr. Kerwin alone understood me, but my gestures and bitter cries were sufficient to affright the other witnesses. Yes, admit to other murders. It's a fever. Clearly they can't hold someone accountable to their words when they have a fever. Like, what is this 2-month thing? That is just, do people have fevers for 2 months? I've had a fever for 2 hours. I can't believe how painful that would be. I swore it was 2 days. Why did I not die? More miserable than man ever was before. Why did I not sink into forgetfulness and rest? This guy has a dramatic understanding of how miserable man has been. Death snatches away many blooming children, the only hopes of their doting parents. How many brides and youthful lovers have been one day in the bloom of health and hope, and the next a prey for worms and the decay of the tomb? Of what materials was I made that I could thus resist so many shocks, which, like the turning of the wheel, continually renewed the torture? They were sicker than no meds to break the fever? I guess so. But I was doomed to live, and in 2 months found myself awaking from a dream in a prison, stretched on a wretched bed, surrounded by jailers, turnkeys, bolts, and all the miserable apparatus of a dungeon. It was morning, I remember, when I thus awoke to understanding. I had forgotten the particulars of what had happened, and only felt as if some great misfortune had suddenly overwhelmed me. But when I looked around and saw the barred windows and the squalidness of the room in which I was, all flashed across my memory, and I groaned bitterly. The sound disturbed an old woman who was sleeping in a chair beside me. She was a hired nurse, the wife of one of the turnkeys, and her countenance expressed all those bad qualities which often characterize that class. Thanks for looking after me. The lines of her face were hard and rude, like that of persons accustomed to see without sympathizing in sights of misery. So a nurse. Her tone expressed her entire indifference. She addressed me in English, and the voice struck me as one that I had heard during my sufferings. "Are you better now, sir?" said she. I replied in the same language with a feeble voice. "I believe I am. But if it be all true, if indeed I did not dream, I am sorry that I am still alive to feel this misery and horror." For that matter, replied the old woman, if you mean about the gentleman that you murdered, I believe that it were better for you if you were dead, for I fancy it will go hard with you. However, that's none of my business. I'm sent to nurse you and get you well. I do my duty with a safe conscience. Oh dear, it were well if everybody did the same. So, this is a classic case of heal you up and make you better so we can torture and execute you later. Some of the habits humans have had in the past are special. I turned with loathing from the woman who could utter so unfeeling a speech to a person just saved on the very edge of death. But I felt languid and unable to reflect on all that had passed. The whole series of my life appeared to me as a dream. I sometimes doubted if indeed it were all true, for it never presented itself to my mind with the force of reality. As the images that floated before me became more distinct, I grew feverish. A darkness pressed around me. No one was near me who soothed me with the gentle voice of love. No dear hand supported me. The physician came and prescribed medicines, and the old woman prepared them for me. But utter carelessness was visible in the first, and the expression of brutality and strongly marked in the visage of the second. Who could be interested in the fate of a murderer but the hangman who would gain his fee? These were my first reflections, but I soon learned that Mr. Kirwan had shown me extreme kindness. He had caused the best room in the prison to be prepared for me. Wretched indeed was the best. And it was he who had provided the physician and a nurse. It is true, he seldom came to see me, for although he ardently desired to relieve the sufferings of every human creature, he did not wish to be present at the agonies and miserable ravings of a murderer. He came, therefore, sometimes to see that I was not neglected, but his visits were short and with long intervals. One day, while I was gradually recovering, I was seated in a chair, my eyes half open and my cheeks livid like those in death. I was overcome by gloom and misery, and often reflected I had better seek death than desire to remain in a world which to me was replete with wretchedness. At one time I considered whether I should not declare myself guilty and suffer the penalty of the law, less innocent than poor Justine had been. Such were my thoughts when the door of my apartment was opened and Mr. Kirwan entered. His countenance expressed sympathy and compassion. He drew a chair close to mine and addressed me in French. I fear that this place is very shocking to you. Can I do anything to make you more comfortable? I thank you. But all that you mention is nothing to me. On the whole earth there is no comfort which I am capable of receiving. Maybe a class in drama. I know that the sympathy of a stranger can be but of little relief to one borne down as you are by so strange a misfortune. But you will, I hope, soon quit this melancholy abode, for doubtless evidence can be easily brought to free you from the criminal charge. That is my least concern. I am, by a course of strange events, become the most miserable of mortals. Persecuted and tortured as I am and have been, can death be any evil to me? Let it be known to everyone, as an aside, that death is never a good answer. You cannot you cannot control Z death. You cannot start over, you cannot fix anything. You're just done. There's no going back. I think death is quite an evil when it's taken before its time. Nothing, indeed, could be more unfortunate and agonizing than the strange chances that have lately occurred. You were thrown by some surprising accident on this shore, renowned for its hospitality, seized immediately, and charged with murder. The first sight that was presented to your eyes was the body of your friend, murdered in so unaccountable a manner and placed, as it were, by some fiend across your path. As Mr. Kirwan said this, notwithstanding the agitation I endured on this retrospect of my sufferings, I also felt considerable surprise at the knowledge he seemed to possess concerning me. I suppose some astonishment was exhibited in my countenance, for Mr. Kirwan hastened to say, "Immediately upon your being taken ill, all the papers that were on your person were brought to me, and I examined them, that I might discover some trace by which I could send to your relations an account of your misfortune and illness. I found several letters, and, among others, one which I discovered from its commencement to be from your father. I instantly wrote to Geneva. Nearly 2 months have elapsed since the departure of my letter, but you are ill. Even now you tremble. You are unfit for agitation of any kind." This suspense is 1,000 times worse than the most horrible event. Tell me, what new scene of death has been acted, and whose murder am I now to lament? "Your family is perfectly well," said Mr. Kirwan with gentleness, "and someone, a friend, is come to visit you." I know not by what chain of thought the idea presented itself, but it instantly darted into my mind that the murderer had come to mock at my misery and taunt me with the death of Clerval, as a new incitement for me to comply with his hellish desires. I put my hand before my eyes and cried out in agony, "Oh, take him away! I cannot see him! For God's sake, do not let him enter!" Mr. Kirwan regarded me with a troubled countenance. He could not help regarding my exclamation as a presumption of my guilt, and said in a rather severe tone, "I should have thought, young man, that the presence of your father would have been welcome instead of inspiring such violent repugnance." "My father?" cried I, while every feature and every muscle was relaxed from anguish to pleasure. "Is my father indeed come? How kind, how very kind! But where is he? Why does he not hasten to me?" The change of manner surprised and pleased the magistrate. Perhaps he thought that my former exclamation was a momentary return of delirium, and now he instantly resumed his former benevolence. He rose and quitted the room with my nurse, and in a moment my father entered it. Nothing at this moment could have given me greater pleasure than the arrival of my father. I stretched out my hand to him and cried, "Are you then safe, and Elizabeth, and Ernest?" My father calmed me with assurances of their welfare, and endeavored, by dwelling on these subjects to be so interesting to my heart, to raise my desponding spirits. But he soon felt that a prison cannot be the abode of cheerfulness. "What a place is this that you inhabit, my son?" said he, looking mournfully at the barred windows and wretched appearance of the room. "You traveled to seek happiness, but a fatality seems to pursue you. And poor Clerval! The name of my unfortunate and murdered friend was an agitation too great to be endured in my weak state. I shed tears. "Alas, yes, my father," replied I. "Some destiny of the most horrible kind hangs over me, and I must live to fulfill it, or surely I should have died on the coffin of Henry." We were not allowed to converse for any length of time, for the precarious state of my health rendered every precaution necessary that could ensure tranquillity. Mr. Kirwan came in and insisted that my strength should not be exhausted by too much exertion. But the appearance of my father was to me like that of my good angel, and I gradually recovered my health. As my sickness quitted me, I was absorbed by a gloomy and black melancholy that nothing could dissipate. Perhaps you should go back to having a fever. The image of Clerval was forever before me, ghastly and murdered. More than once the agitation into which these reflections threw me made my friends dread a dangerous relapse. Alas, why did they preserve so miserable and detested a life? It was surely that I might fulfill my destiny, which is now drawing to a close. Oh, soon, very soon, Will death extinguish these throbbings and relieve me from the mighty weight of anguish that bears me to the dust? And in executing the award of justice, I shall also sink to rest. Then the appearance of death was distant, although the wish was ever present to my thoughts, and I often sat for hours, motionless and speechless, wishing for some mighty revolution that might bury me, or bury me and my destroyer in its ruins. The season of the, oh dear, assizes? Assizes. It's assizes or as sizes. Okay, Filana, your job. ASSIZES. The season of the assizes approached. I had already been 3 months in prison, and although I was still weak and in continual danger of a relapse, I was obliged to travel nearly 100 miles to the country town where the court was held. Dear God, really? Mr. Kirwan charged himself with every care of collecting witnesses and arranging my defense. I was spared the disgrace of appearing publicly as a criminal, and the case was not brought before the court that decides on life and death. The grand jury rejected the bill, on its being proved that I was on the Orkney Islands at the hour the body of my friend was found, and a fortnight after my removal, I was liberated from prison. The court held at regular intervals. Oh, because small place. Yeah, you need to confess. My father was enraptured on finding me freed from the vexations of a criminal charge, that I was again allowed to breathe the fresh atmosphere and permitted to return to my native country. I did not participate in these feelings, for to me the walls of a dungeon or a palace were alike hateful. The cup of life was poisoned forever, and although the sun shone upon me as upon the happy and gay of heart, I saw around me nothing but a dense and frightful darkness, penetrated by no light but the glimmer of 2 eyes that glared upon me. Sometimes there were the expressive eyes of Henry, languishing in death, the dark orbs nearly covered by the lids and the long black lashes that fringed them. Sometimes it was the watery, clouded eyes of the monster, as I first saw them in my chamber at Ingolstadt. My father tried to awaken in me the feelings of affection. He talked of Geneva, which I should which I should soon visit, of Elizabeth and Ernest, but these words only drew deep groans from me. Sometimes, indeed, I felt a wish for happiness, and thought with melancholy delight of my beloved cousin, or longed with a devouring maladie du pays. I think we had that word before, and I don't remember what it means. To see once more the blue lake and rapid Rhone. The Rhone, that's my brain's not liking that word. Rhine. It's supposed to be Rhine. Is there one that's just like RHOEN? Oh, sorry, ONE? Yeah, it's supposed to be Rhine. It typed it with an O instead of an I, and it's throwing me off. Anyways, large blue lake and a rapid river. We've seen the Rhine. It ain't rapid. Let's see, Rhine. That had been so dear to me in early childhood. But my general state of feeling was a torpor in which a prison was as welcome a residence as the divinest scene in nature, and these fits were seldom interrupted by, oh dear, paroxysms of anguish and despair. It is also Rhone. Okay, maybe it's faster than the Rhine. At these moments, I often endeavored to put an end to the existence I loathed, and it required unceasing attendance and vigilance to restrain me from committing some dreadful act of violence. Yet one duty remained to me, the recollection of which finally triumphed over my selfish despair. It was necessary that I should return without delay to Geneva, there to watch over the lives of those I so fondly loved, and to lie in wait for the murderer, that if any chance led me to the place of his concealment, or if he dared again to blast me by his presence, I might, with unfailing aim, put an end to the existence of the monstrous image which I had endured with the mockery of a soul still more monstrous. My father still desired to delay our departure, fearful that I could not sustain the fatigues of a journey, for I was a shattered wreck, the shadow of a human being. My strength was gone. I was a mere skeleton, and fever night and day preyed upon my wasted frame. It's a lot of fevers. Still, as I urged our leaving Ireland with such inquietude and impatience, my father thought it best to yield. We took our passage on board a vessel bound for Havre de Grace, and sailed with a fair wind from the Irish shores. It was midnight. I lay on the deck, looking at the stars and listening to the dashing of the waves. I hailed the darkness that shut Ireland from my sight, and my pulse beat with a feverish joy when I reflected that I should soon see Geneva. The past appeared to me in the light of a frightful dream. Yet the vessel in which I was, the wind that blew me from the detested shore of Ireland, and the sea which surrounded me, told me too forcibly that I was deceived by no vision, and that Clerval, my friend and dearest companion, had fallen a victim to me and the monster of my creation. I repassed in my memory my whole life, my quiet happiness while residing with my family in Geneva, the death of my mother, and my departure for Ingolstadt. I remembered, shuddering, the mad enthusiasm that hurried me on to the creation of my hideous enemy, and I called to mind the night in which he first lived. I was unable to pursue the train of thought. 1,000 feelings pressed upon me, and I wept bitterly. You know what just occurred to me? You know how superheroes have their origin story, and often they are the product of their arch nemesis? Isn't the monster here the superhero? And Victor Frankenstein is the arch nemesis, the big bad guy. This story is just from the arch nemesis point of view. Yeah. That's how I'm framing this story in my mind from now on. Well, superhero is probably the wrong category. He is kind of he kind of do be dark, but a lot of heroes are dark and do dark things. Yeah, the monster is not a hero. That's true. He hasn't really saved anyone. He is kind of also evil, I guess. I can only excuse his actions so many times. But from his perspective, let's think about this. He was thrust into a world that hated and rejected and chased him and attacked him. Every avenue he sought for any kind of succor was shut to him. And even that one moment when his own creator was about to grant his wish, it was snatched away. Just snatched. Now he's operating on the rules that he understands, right? Think about that. Like, superheroes do that. Heroes do that. They operate on the rules they understand, and they fight against the oppression that exists in their worlds. Yeah, he understands from a sort of an outside of the bottle perspective that the world around him is evil, and these people attack and they hate, right? Especially outsiders. And so as an outsider, he has to operate within that premise. He doesn't know any better. He is doing the best he can do, right? So everything's contextual. Often a lot of superheroes are also contextual, right? What one man's superhero is another man's nemesis. So, yeah, he came into the world as a blank slate, and the world taught him to do what we think of as evil. But no one's ever taught him that murder is evil, right? That that there are consequences to murder and that murder is not how you get things. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Murder is the only thing that has gotten him anywhere. He has been taught by this world that murder is a means to an end. And that also, if you kill someone, other people around them will just blame it on somebody else. Interesting. This is kind of a, from our perspective, a no good guys kind of scenario. Different degrees of evil people. All right, where were we? We were hydrating. This is a hydration moment. Thanks for clicking hydrate, Amanda. Still, as I urged our leaving Ireland with such inquietude, oh, I've read that part. Where the hell am I? Most people, if you return, okay, Janie appeared to be the wind. I should have highlighted something, dear Lord. My friend and dearest companion had fallen victim to be the monster of my creation. I repassed. Wolf fact. Oh, wolves have powerful jaws, which they use to take down their kill with a crushing power of nearly 680 kilograms, or 1,500 pounds if you don't understand a real system, per square inch. It's odd that we're doing crushing power of kilograms per square inch. I find that amusing. That's hard though, and like not even as close to crocodiles apparently. I repassed in my memory my whole life, my quiet happiness while residing with my family in Geneva, the death of my mother, and my departure for Ingolstadt. I remembered shuddering the mad enthusiasm that hurried me on to the creation of my hideous enemy, and I called to mind the night in which he had first lived. I was unable to pursue the train of thought. 1,000 feelings pressed upon me, and I wept bitterly. I think we did that part. Ever since my recovery from the fever, I had been in the custom of taking every night a small quantity of laudanum. It was by means of this drug only that I was enabled to gain the rest necessary for the preservation of life. Oppressed by the recollection of my various misfortunes, I now swallowed double the usual quantity, and soon slept profoundly. But sleep did not afford me respite, from the thought and misery in my dreams presented 1,000 objects that scared me. Towards morning, I was possessed by a kind of nightmare. I felt the fiend's grasp in my neck, and could not free myself from it. Groans and cries rang in my ears. My father, who was watching over me, perceived my restlessness, awoke me. The dashing waves were around, the cloudy sky above. The fiend was not here. A sense of security, a feeling that a truce was established between the present hour and the irresistible, disastrous future imparted to me a kind of calm forgetfulness, of which the human mind is by its structure peculiarly susceptible. That is actually the end of chapter 22. Chapter 22. The voyage came to an end. We landed and proceeded to Paris. I soon found that I had overtaxed my strength, and that I must repose before I could continue my journey. My father's care and attentions were indefatigable, but he did not know the origin of my sufferings and sought erroneous methods to remedy the incurable ill. He wished me to seek amusement in society. I abhorred the face of man. Oh, not abhorred. They were my brethren, my fellow beings, and I felt attracted even to the most repulsive among them. But as to creatures of an angelic nature and celestial mechanism. But I felt that I had no right to share their intercourse. I had unchained an enemy among them whose joy it was to shed their blood and to revel in their groans. Or revel in their groans. How they would each and all abhor me and hunt me from the world, did they know my unhallowed acts and the crimes which I which had their source in me. My father yielded at length to my desire to avoid society and strove by various arguments to banish my despair. Sometimes he thought that I felt deeply the degradation of being obliged to answer a charge of murder, and he endeavored to prove to me the futility of pride. Alas, my father, said I, how little do you know me. Human beings, their feelings and passions would indeed be degraded if such a wretch as I felt pride. Justine, poor unhappy Justine, was as innocent as I, and she suffered the same charge. She died for it, and I am the cause of this. I murdered her. William, Justine, and Henry, they all died by my hands. Well then, you're not as innocent as Justine was, are you? My father had often, during my imprisonment, heard me make the same assertion. When I thus accused myself, he sometimes seemed to desire an explanation, and at others he appeared to consider it as the offspring of delirium, and that, during my illness, some idea of this kind had presented itself to my imagination, the remembrance of which I preserved in my convalescence. I avoided explanation and maintained a continual silence concerning the wretch I had created. I had a persuasion that I should be supposed mad, and this in itself would forever have changed my tongue. But besides, I could not bring myself to disclose a secret which would fill my hearer with consternation and make fear and unnatural horror the inmates of his breast. I checked, therefore, my impatient thirst for sympathy, and was silent when I would have given the world to have confided the fatal secret. Yet still, words like those I have recorded would burst uncontrollably from me. I could offer no explanation of them, but their truth in part revealed the burden of my mysterious woe. So his father has suspicions, but he probably doesn't want them confirmed, so he doesn't pursue an answer. That's the feeling I'm getting here. I daren't risk the chance that my son actually be an evil murderer. And his son, I daren't say that I'm even worse than being a murderer, for I created an unholy being. Looks like we're going to have ads in a few minutes. Like ads right now? What happened to my alarms? Yeah, no, even Twitch is saying like ad starts in 2.5 minutes. And Gwen should give us a 1-minute warning. All right, yeah. Yeah, I have timers and notices like just to the left of where I'm reading. So I'm probably seeing the same things you are here. Yeah. Yeah. Upon this occasion, my father said, with an expression of unbounded wonder, "My dearest Victor, what infatuation is this? My dear son, I entreat you never to make such an assertion again." "I am not mad," I cried energetically. "The sun and the heavens who have viewed my operations can bear witness of my truth. I am the assassin of those most innocent victims. They died by my machinations. 1,000 times would I have shed my own blood, drop by drop, to have saved their lives, but I could not, my father. Indeed, I could not sacrifice the whole human race." Yeah, Dad's got to be really confused now. What the hell are you talking about, boy? The conclusion of this speech convinced my father that my ideas were deranged, and he insistently changed the subject of our conversation and endeavored to alter the course of my thoughts. He wished as much as possible to obliterate the memory of the scenes that had taken place in Ireland, and never alluded to them or suffered me to speak of my misfortunes. As time passed away, I became more calm. Misery had her dwelling in my heart. but I no longer talked in the same incoherent manner of my own crimes. Sufficient for me was the consciousness of them. By the utmost self-violence, I curbed the imperious voice of wretchedness, which sometimes desired to declare itself to the whole world, and my manners were calmer and more composed than they had ever been since my journey to the Sea of Ice. We do have an ad in a few seconds here. I'm going to pause here for that. We're going to go to a Be Right Back screen until the ads are over, and then we will return presently thereafter. Yeah. Now, Twitch says we have 5 seconds. But if Twitch's timers are anything to be believed, then no, it would be shortly after that. Awkward silence time. I could have read one more sentence, I guess. Just one, though. And I would hate to be in the middle of a paragraph after that. At this point, I could have reddited a whole paragraph, perhaps, but I would feel rushed, and that would be awkward. Come on, Gwen, say the words. I wonder why Twitch's timers are so unreliable. There we go. And we're back. Awesome. All right. We continue. Did the cats meow? Did they meow at me as I was leaving? I went upstairs. That's where Valana is. A few days before we left Paris on our way to Switzerland, I received the following letter from Elizabeth. My dear friend. She only said dear. She didn't say dearest. That's a red flag. My dear friend, it gave me the greatest pleasure to receive a letter from my uncle dated at Paris. You are no longer at a formidable distance, and I may hope to see you in less than a fortnight. My poor cousin, how much you must have suffered. I expect to see you looking even more ill than when you quitted Geneva. This winter has been passing most miserably, tortured as I have been by anxious suspense. Yet I hope to see peace in your countenance and to find that your heart is not totally void of comfort and tranquility. Yet I fear the same feelings now exist that made you so miserable a year ago, even perhaps augmented by time. I would not disturb you at this period when so many misfortunes weigh upon you, but a conversation that I had with my uncle previous to his departure renders some explanation necessary before we meet. Explanation. You may possibly say, what can Elizabeth have to explain? If you really say this, my questions are answered and all my doubts satisfied. But you are distant from me, and it is possible that you may dread and yet be pleased with this explanation. And in a probability of this being the case, I dare not any longer postpone writing that during your absence I may have often wished to express to you, but have never had the courage to begin. This girl wastes a lot of ink and paper. Respect trees more. You well know, Victor, that our union had been the favorite plan of your parents ever since our infancy. We were told this when we were young and taught to look forward to it as an event that would certainly take place. Yeah, just say it exactly. We were affectionate playfellows during childhood and, I believe, dear and valued friends to one another as we grew older. But as brother and sister often entertain a lively affection towards each other without desiring a more intimate union, may not such also be our case? Tell me, dearest Victor, Answer me, I conjure you I conjure you by our mutual happiness with simple truth. Do you not love another? You have traveled. You have spent several years of your life at Ingolstadt, and I confess to you, my friend, that when I saw you last autumn so unhappy, flying to solitude from the society of every creature, that I cannot help supposing that you might regret our connection and believe yourself bound in honor to fulfill the wishes of your parents, although they opposed themselves on your inclinations. But this is false reasoning. I confess to you, my friend, that I love you, and that in my airy dreams of futurity, dear Lord, futurity, you have been my constant friend and companion. But it is your happiness I desire as well as my own, when I declare to you that our marriage would render me eternally miserable unless it were the dictate of your own free choice. Even now I weep to think, borne down as you are by the cruelest misfortunes, you may stifle, by the word honor, all hope of that love and happiness which would alone restore you to yourself. I, who have so disinterested any affection for you, may increase your miseries tenfold by being an obstacle to your wishes. Ah, Victor, be assured that your cousin and playmate has too sincere a love for you not to be made miserable by this supposition. Be happy, my friend, and if you obey me in this one request, remain satisfied that nothing on earth will have the power to interrupt my tranquility. She said, ah, in a letter. Is that normal? I mean, we emote and stuff in text, but that's kind of I feel like that's different. Anyways, do not let this letter disturb you. Do not answer tomorrow, or the next day, or even until you come, if it will give you pain. My uncle will send me news of your health, and if I see but one smile on your lips when we meet, occasioned by this or any other exertion of mine, I shall need no other happiness. Elizabeth Lavenza. Hello, content. Welcome to the stream. We're reading the ending of Frankenstein. We're on what, 22? I think chapter 22. Geneva, May 18th, 17 something or other a year. This letter revived in my memory what I had before forgotten, the threat of the fiend. I will be with you on your wedding night. Such was my sentence, and on that night would the daemon employ every art to destroy me and tear me from the glimpse of happiness which promised partly to console my sufferings. On that night he had determined to consummate his crimes by my death. Well, be it so. A deadly struggle would then assuredly take place, in which, if he were victorious, I should be at peace, and his power over me be at an end. If he were vanquished, I should be a free man. Alas, what freedom! Such as the peasant enjoys when his family have been massacred before his eyes, his cottage burnt, his lands laid waste, and he is turned adrift, homeless, penniless and alone, but free. Such would be my liberty, except that in my Elizabeth I possessed a treasure, alas, balanced by those horrors of remorse and guilt which would pursue me until death. Sweet and beloved Elizabeth, I read and reread her letter, and some softened feeling stole into my heart and dared to whisper paradisical dreams of love and joy. But the apple was already eaten, and the angel's arm bared to drive me from all hope. Yet I would not die to make her happy. If the monster executed his threat, death was inevitable. Yet again, I considered whether my marriage would hasten my fate. My destruction might indeed arrive a few months sooner, but if my torturer should suspect that I postponed it, influenced by his menaces, he would surely find other and perhaps more dreadful means of revenge. He had vowed to be with me on my wedding night, yet he did not consider that threat as binding him to a peace in the meantime. For, as if to show me that he was not yet satisfied with blood, he had murdered Clerval immediately after the enunciation of his threats. I resolved, therefore, that if my immediate union with my cousin would conduce either to hers or my father's happiness, my adversary's designs, my adversary, yeah, there's a better way to pronounce that, adversary's designs against my life should not retard it in a single hour. In this state of mind, I wrote to Elizabeth. My letter was calm and affectionate. I fear, my beloved girl, I said, little happiness remains for us on earth, yet all that I may one day enjoy is centered in you. Chase away your idle fears. To you alone do I consecrate my life and my endeavors for contentment. I have one secret, Elizabeth, a dreadful one. When revealed to you, it will chill your frame with horror, and then, far from being surprised at my misery, you will only wonder that I have survived what I have endured. I will confide this tale of misery and terror to you the day after our marriage shall take place. For, my sweet cousin, there must be perfect confidence between us. But until then, I conjure you, do not mention or allude to it. This I most earnestly entreat, and know you will comply. So these circumstances, we are looking at them from the point of view of Victor. We kind of understand why he wants to wait until after the marriage, right? Things will be resolved at that point. The danger will be passed one way or the other. But from her perspective, oh, my love is this horrible, nasty, evil person, and I have to marry him to find out the truth. And it kind of like back then, marriage, I think it was like more concrete than it is today, right? So that's a jump. That's a leap of faith. In about a week after the arrival of Elizabeth's letter, we returned to Geneva. The sweet girl welcomed me with warm affection, yet tears were in her eyes as she beheld my emaciated frame and feverish cheeks. I saw a change in her also. She was thinner and had lost much of that heavenly vivacity that had before charmed me. But her gentleness and soft looks of compassion made her a more fit companion for one blasted and miserable as I was. The tranquillity which I now enjoyed did not endure. Memory brought madness with it, and when I thought of what had passed, a real insanity possessed me. Sometimes I was furious and burnt with rage, sometimes low and despondent. I neither spoke nor looked at anyone, but sat motionless, bewildered by the multitude of miseries that overcame me. Elizabeth alone had the power to draw me from these fits. Her gentle voice would soothe me when transported by passion, and inspire me with human feelings when sunk in torpor. She wept with me and for me. When reason returned, she would remonstrate and endeavor to inspire me with resignation. Ah, it is well for the unfortunate to be resigned, but for the guilty there is no peace. The agonies of remorse poison the luxury there is otherwise sometimes found in indulging the excess of grief. Soon after my arrival, my father spoke of my immediate marriage with Elizabeth. I remained silent. Have you, then, some other attachment? None on earth. I love Elizabeth and look forward to our union with delight. Let the day therefore be fixed, and on it I will consecrate myself in life or death to the happiness of my cousin. He spent one sentence putting it off. Well, it's good. You have worse procrastinators in today's day. My dear Victor, do not speak thus. Heavy misfortunes have befallen us, but let us only cling closer to what remains and transfer our love for those whom we have lost to those who yet live. Our circle will be small, but bound close by the ties of affection and mutual misfortune. And when time shall have softened your despair, new and dear objects of care will be born to replace those of whom we have been so cruelly deprived. Yeah, Victor. Everyone else has lost people too. Such were the lessons of my father, but to me the remembrance of the threat returned. Nor can you wonder that, omnipotent as the fiend had yet been in his deeds of blood, I should almost regard him as invincible, and that, when he heard pronounced the words, "I shall be with you on your wedding night," I should regard the threatened fate as unavoidable. But death was no evil to me if the loss of Elizabeth were balanced with it, and I, therefore, with a contented and even cheery countenance, agreed with my father that if my cousin would consent, the ceremony should take place in 10 days, and thus put, as I imagined, the seal to my fate. You know, in the Forgotten Realms, that's a week, a 10-day. Great God, if for one instant I had thought what might be the hellish intention of my fiendish adversary. Boy, going to be put in the NTR chair. Falana. Sure to sound like some of our younger VTuber friends. Great, what? Yeah, don't what me. Great God, if for one instant I had thought what might be the hellish intention of my fiendish adversary, I would have rather banished myself forever from my native country and wandered a friendless outcast over the earth than have consented to this miserable marriage. But, as if possessed of magic powers, the monster had blinded me to his real intentions, and when I thought that I had prepared only my own death, I hastened that of a far dearer victim. Yeah, you kind of get from the story that Victor might still be alive, because he's telling you the story. I mean, I guess it could be a ghost or something, but yeah. As the period fixed for our marriage drew nearer, whether from cowardice or prophetic feeling, I felt my heart sink within me, but I concealed my feelings by an appearance of hilarity that brought smiles and joy to the countenance of my father, but hardly deceived the ever-watchful and nicer eye of Elizabeth. She looked forward to our union with placid contentment, not unmingled with a little fear which past misfortunes had impressed, that what now appeared certain and tangible happiness might soon dissipate into an airy dream, and leave no trace but deep and everlasting regret. Preparations were made for the event. Congratulatory visits were received, and all wore a smiling appearance. I shut up, as well as I could, in my own heart the anxiety that preyed there, and entered with seeming earnestness into my plans of my father, although they might only serve as the decorations of my tragedy. Through my father's exertions, a part of the inheritance of Elizabeth had been restored to her by the Austrian government. A small possession on the shores of Como belonged to her. It was agreed that, immediately after our union, we should proceed to Villa Lavenza and spend our first days of happiness beside the beautiful lake near which it stood. In the meantime, I took every precaution to defend my person in case the fiend should openly attack me. I carried pistols and a dagger constantly about me, and was ever on watch to prevent artifice, and by these means gained a greater degree of tranquillity. Indeed, as the period approached, the threat appeared more as a delusion, not to be regarded as worthy to disturb my peace, while the happiness I hoped for in my marriage wore a greater appearance of certainty as the day fixed for its solemnization drew nearer, and I heard it continually spoken of as an occurrence which no accident could possibly prevent. Everyone has that opinion about marriages, right? Like, they all have to be perfect. Elizabeth seemed happy. My tranquil demeanor contributed greatly to calm her mind. But on the day that was to fulfill my wishes and my destiny, she was melancholy, and a presentiment of evil pervaded her. And perhaps also she thought of the dreadful secret which I had promised to reveal to her on the following day. My father was in the meantime overjoyed, and, in the bustle of preparation, only recognized the melancholy of his niece, the diffidence of a bride. So, what do you suppose is going through her mind right now? What could her groom, her husband to be, possibly only tell her after she has committed herself in like contracted matrimony to him, where she can no longer get away? What kind of dread would her anxiety drive into her mind? Hello, Elizabeth. The horrible truth is, I am adopted and actually have no properties, and I'm poor. The truth is, I've come back only to get married to you on the agreement that I'll go back to Ireland to be executed for my crimes. You're going to be a widower. Thanks for coming by. Or, or yeah, who knows? I've sold you? Like, what other horrible things going to happen to women without any power in this period? Lucky Elizabeth. After the ceremony was performed, a large party assembled at my father's, but it was agreed that Elizabeth and I should commence our journey by water, sleeping that night at Evian and continuing our voyage the following day. The day was fair, the wind favorable, all smiled on our nuptial embarkation. Those were the last moments of my life during which I enjoyed the feeling of happiness. We passed rapidly along. The sun was hot, but we were sheltered from its rays by a kind canopy of white. We enjoyed the beauty of the scene. While we enjoyed the beauty of the scene. Sometimes on one side of the lake, we saw Mont Salive, the pleasant banks of Montelgur, and at a distance, surmounting all, the beautiful Mount Blanc, and the assemblage of snowy mountains that in vain endeavored to emulate her. Sometimes, coasting the opposite banks, we saw the mighty Jura opposing its dark side to the ambition that would quit its native country, and an almost insurmountable barrier to the invader who should wish to enslave it. I took the hand of Elizabeth. You are sorrowful, my love. Ah, if you knew what I have suffered and what I may yet endure, you would endeavor to let me taste the quiet and freedom from despair that this one day at least permits me to enjoy. You've been torturing her since you sent the letter, Victor. This is your fault. Be happy, my dear Victor, replied Elizabeth. There is, I hope, nothing to distress you. And be assured that if a lively joy is not painted in my face, my heart is contented. Something whispers to me not to depend too much on the prospect that is opened before us, but I will not listen to such a sinister voice. Observe how fast we move along, and how the clouds, which sometimes obscure and sometimes rise above the dome of Mont Blanc, render this scene of beauty still more interesting. Look also at the innumerable fish that are swimming in the clear waters, where we can distinguish every pebble that lies at the bottom. What a divine day! How happy and serene all nature appears. Thus Elizabeth endeavored to divert her thoughts and mine from all reflection upon melancholy subjects. But her temper was fluctuating. Joy for a few instants shone in her eyes, but it continually gave place to distraction and reverie. The sun sank lower in the heavens. We passed the river Drance and observed its path through the chasms of the higher and the glens of the lower hills. The Alps here come closer to the lake, and we approached the amphitheater of mountains which forms its eastern boundary. The spire of Evian shone under the woods that surrounded it, and the range of mountain above mountain by which it was overhung. The wind, which had hitherto carried us along with amazing rapidity, sank at sunset to a light breeze. The soft air just ruffled the water and caused a pleasant motion among the trees as we approached the shore, from which it wafted the most delightful scent of flowers and hay. The sun sank beneath the horizon as we landed, and as I touched the shore, I felt those cares and fears revive which soon were to clasp me and cling to me forever. It sure sounds like a nice place to take a boat ride. Convenient winds carrying you quickly, only to die and become a pleasant atmosphere at the end of your journey. Chapter 23. It was 8 o'clock when we landed. We walked for a short time on the shore, enjoying the transitory light, and then retired to the inn and contemplated the lovely scenes of waters, woods, and mountains, obscured in the darkness, yet still displaying their black outlines. The wind, which had fallen in the south, now rose with great violence in the west. The moon had reached her summit in the heavens and was beginning to descend. The clouds swept across it swifter than the flight of the vulture, and dimmed her rays, while the lake reflected the scene of the bussy. I want to say the busy heavens. All right. Gotta reset my mouth. The bussy heavens. Oh Lord. Okay, the lake reflected scenes of the busy heavens. Yeah, look, it's not a typo. It's a word fumble. It's a fumble. No, I had a word for that. What word was I using when I messed up speaking? I'll watch one of my earlier streams to find out. I attempted to mute and I didn't press the button hard. Yeah, flub. Sure, flub will do. It's a word, flub. Busy heavens. It isn't even a hard word to say. Rendered still busier by the restless waves that were beginning to rise, suddenly a heavy storm of rain descended. He always shows up in the rain. Did you notice that? I had been calm during the day, but so soon as night obscured the shapes of objects, 1,000 fears arose in my mind. I was anxious and watchful, while my right hand grasped a pistol, which was hidden in my bosom, the best place to put pistols. Every sound terrified me, but I resolved that I would sell my life dearly and not shrink from the conflict until my own life or that of my adversary was extinguished. Elizabeth observed my agitation for some time in timid and fearful silence, but there was something in my glance which communicated terror to her, and trembling, she asked, "What is it that agitates you, my dear Victor? What is it that you fear?" "Oh, peace, peace, my love," replied I. "This night, and all will be safe, but this night is dreadful, and very dreadful." I passed an hour in this state of mind, when suddenly I reflected how fearful the combat which I momentarily expected would be to my wife, and I earnestly entreated her to retire, resolving not to join her until I had obtained some knowledge as to the situation of my enemy. She left me, and I continued some time walking up and down the passages of the house and inspecting every corner that might afford a retreat to my adversary. Adversary is actually how I should have been. I thought I was being snarky and clever. Adversary is how that damn word is supposed to be pronounced. Or start over, chapter 1. But I discovered no trace of him, and was beginning to conjecture that some fortunate chance had intervened to prevent the execution of his menaces, when suddenly I heard a shrill and dreadful scream. It came from the room into which Elizabeth had retired. As I heard it, the whole truth rushed into my mind. My arms dropped. The motion of every muscle and fiber was suspended. I could feel the blood trickling in my veins and tingling in the extremities of my limbs. This state lasted for but an instant. The scream was repeated, and I rushed into the room. Great God! Why did I not then expire? Why am I here to relate the destruction of the best hope and the purest creature on earth? She was there, lifeless and inanimate, thrown across the bed, her head hanging down and her pale and distorted features half covered by her hair. Everywhere I turn, I see the same figure, her bloodless arms and relaxed form flung by the murderer on its bridal bier. Could I behold this and live? Alas, life is obstinate and clings closest where it is most hated. For a moment only did I lose recollection. I fell senseless on the ground. When I recovered, I found myself surrounded by the people of the inn. Their countenances expressed a breathless terror, but the horror of others appeared only as a mockery, a shadow of the feelings that oppressed me. I escaped from them to the room where lay the body of Elizabeth, my love, my wife, so lately living, so dear, so worthy. She had been moved from the posture in which I had first beheld her, and now, as she lay, her head upon her arm and a handkerchief thrown across her face and neck, I might have supposed her asleep. I rushed towards her and embraced her with an ardor, but the deadly, languor and coldness of the limbs told me that what I now held in my arms had ceased to be the Elizabeth whom I had loved and cherished. The murderous mark of the fiend's grasp was on her neck, and the breath had ceased to issue from her lips. While I still hung over her in the agony of despair, I happened to look up. The windows of the room had before been darkened, and I felt a kind of panic on seeing the pale yellow light of the moon illuminate the chamber. The shutters had been thrown back, and with a sensation of horror not to be described, I saw at the open window a figure the most hideous and abhorred. A grin was on the face of the monster. He seemed to jeer, as with his fiendish finger he pointed towards the corpse of my wife. I rushed towards the window, and drawing a pistol from my bosom, fired. But he eluded me, leaped from his station, and, running with the swiftness of lightning, plunged into the lake. Yeah, eye for an eye. He destroyed the creature's wife. You took my happiness from you, I took yours from you. My happiness from me, I took yours from you. Yes, this is what I said. The report of the pistol brought a crowd into the room. I pointed to the spot where he had disappeared, and we followed the track with boats. Nets were cast, but in vain. After passing several hours, we returned hopeless, most of my companions believing it to have been a form conjured up by my fancy, except for the tracks you followed into the lake, like... Ooh, a dog fact. Corgi is Welsh for dwarf dog. Oh, so corgis are minors. That's what I get from that. Where are we? The report of the pistol pointed to the spot. Form conjured up by my fancy. All right. After having landed, they proceeded to search the country, parties going in different directions among the woods and vines. I attempted to accompany them and proceeded a short distance from the house. But my head whirled around. My steps were like those of a drunken man. I fell at last in a state of utter exhaustion. A film covered my eyes, and my skin was parched with the heat of fever. In this state, I was carried back and placed on a bed, hardly conscious of what had happened. My eyes wandered round the room as if to seek something that I had lost. After an interval, I arose, and as if by instinct, crawled into the room where the corpse of my beloved lay. There were women weeping around. I hung over it and joined my sad tears to theirs. All this time, no distinct idea presented itself to my mind, but my thoughts rambled to various subjects, reflecting confusedly on my misfortunes and their cause. I was bewildered, in a crowd of wonder and horror. The death of William, the execution of Justine, the murder of Clerval, and lastly of my wife. Even at that moment, I knew not that my only remaining friends were safe from the malignity of the fiend. My father even now might be writhing under his grasp, and Ernest might be dead at his feet. This idea made me shudder and recalled me to action. I started up and resolved to return to Geneva with all possible speed. You cannot catch him. He is such a delicate boy. Yeah. Fever's here, fever's there. Oh, but I'm still going to run somewhere. There were no horses to be procured, and I must return by the lake, but the wind was unfavorable, and the rain fell in torrents. However, it was hardly morning, and I might reasonably hope to arrive by night. I hired men to row and took an oar myself, for I had always experienced relief from mental torment in bodily exercise. But the overflowing misery I now felt, and the excess of agitation that I endured, rendered me incapable of any exertion. I threw down the oar, and leaning my head upon my hands, gave way to every gloomy idea that arose. If I looked up, I saw scenes which were familiar to me in my happier time, and which I had contemplated but the day before in the company of her who was now but a shadow and a recollection. Tears streamed from my eyes. The rain had ceased for a moment, and I saw the fish play in the waters as they had done a few hours before. They had then been observed by Elizabeth. Nothing is so painful to the human mind as a great and sudden change. The sun might shine or the clouds might lower, but nothing could appear to me as it had done the day before. A fiend had snatched from me every hope of future happiness. No creature had ever been so miserable as I was. So frightful an event is single in so frightful of an event is single in the history of man. Like, I guess he's not encountered the bombing of, the use of atomic bombs, right? That might be worse. Maybe. Perhaps. But why should I dwell upon the incidents that followed this last overwhelming event? Yes, too early. He wouldn't know about them. That's to be fair, yeah. There are probably better examples I could come up with. Like, they probably had war back then. Many people died. Many lovers were lost to war. Disease. Bad reviews in the local newspaper. Justice. Happens to a lot of people. But why should I dwell upon the incidents that followed this last overwhelming event? Mine has been a tale of horrors, and I have reached their acme. I have reached their acme, and what I must now relate can be but tedious to you. Know that, one by one, my friends were snatched away. I was left desolate. My own strength is exhausted, and I must tell, in a few words, what remains of my hideous narration. I arrived at Geneva. My father and Ernest yet lived, but the former sunk under the tidings that I bore. I see him now, excellent and venerable old man. His eyes wandered in vacancy, for they had lost their charm and their delight. His Elizabeth, his more than daughter, whom he doted on with all that affection which a man feels who, in the decline of life, having few affections, clings more earnestly to those that remain. Cursed be the fiend that brought misery on his gray hairs and doomed him to waste in wretchedness. He could not live under the horrors that were accumulated around him. The springs of existence suddenly gave way. He was unable to rise from his bed, and in a few days he died in my arms. What then became of me? I know not. I lost sensation, and chains and darkness were the only objects that pressed upon me. Sometimes, indeed, I dreamt that I wandered in flowery meadows and pleasant vales with the friends of my youth. But I awoke and found myself in a dungeon. Melancholy followed, but by degrees I gained a clear conception of my miseries and situation, and was then released from my prison. For they had called me mad, and that's a word flub. For they had called me mad, and during many months, as I understood, a solitary cell had been my habitation. Liberty, however, had been a useless gift to me. Had I not, as I awakened to reason, at the same time awakened to revenge? As the memory of past misfortunes pressed upon me, I began to reflect on their cause. The monster whom I had created, the miserable daemon whom I had sent abroad into the world for my destruction. I was possessed by a maddening rage when I thought of him, and desired and ardently prayed that I might have him within my grasp to wreak a great and single revenge on his cursed head. Nor did my hate long confine itself to useless wishes. I began to reflect on the best means of securing him, and for this purpose, about a month after my release, I repaired to a criminal judge in the town and told him that I had an accusation to make, that I knew the destroyer of my family, and that I required him to exert his whole authority for the apprehension of the murderer. The magistrate listened to me with attention and kindness. "Be assured, sir," said he, "no pains or exertions on my part shall be spared to discover the villain." "I thank you," replied I. "Listen, therefore, to the deposition that I have to make. It is indeed a tale so strange that I should fear you would not credit it, were there not something in truth which, however wonderful, forces conviction. The story is too connected to be mistaken for a dream, and I have no motive for falsehood." My manner, as I thus addressed him, was impressive but calm. I had formed in my own heart a resolution to pursue my destroyer to death, and this purpose quieted my agony, and for an interval reconciled me to life. Believe me, bro. Yeah. I now related my history briefly, but with firmness and precision, marking the dates with accuracy and never deviating into invective or exclamation. Yeah, I promise. There's no other explanation, therefore I'm right. The magistrate appeared at first perfectly incredulous, but as I continued, he became more attentive and interested. I saw him sometimes shudder with horror, at others a lively surprise unmingled with disbelief was painted on his countenance. When I had concluded my narration, I said, "This is the being whom I accuse, and for whose seizure and punishment I call upon you to exert your whole power. It is your duty as a magistrate, and I believe and hope that your feelings as a man will not revolt from the execution of those functions on this occasion." "Mr. Police Officer, it's your job to arrest this person on the road who's not doing anything to me. Victor hereby proclaimed not only a pansy, but a Karen." A foppish Karen. Also the arch nemesis in the story. This address caused a considerable change in the physiognomy. The physiognomy? Yes, it's going to be physiognomy of my own auditor. He had heard my story with that half kind of belief that is given to a tale of spirits and supernatural events. But when he was called upon to act officially in consequence, the whole tide of his incredulity returned. Incredulity returned. He, however, answered mildly, "I would willingly afford you every aid in your pursuit, but the creature of whom you speak appears to have powers which would put all my exertions to defiance. Who can follow an animal which can traverse the sea of ice and inhabit caves and dens where no man would venture to intrude? Besides, some months have elapsed since the commission of his crimes, and no one can conjecture to what place he has wandered or what region he may now inhabit. I do not doubt that he hovers near the spot which I inhabit, and if he has indeed taken refuge in the Alps, he may be hunted like the cameos and destroyed as a beast of prey. But I perceive your thoughts. You do not credit my narrative, and do not intend to pursue my enemy with the punishment which is his desert." Well, desert, if you want to, read the word that was typed out. As I spoke, rage sparkled in my eyes. The magistrate was intimidated. "You are mistaken," said he. "I will exert myself, and if it is in my power to seize the monster, be assured that he shall suffer punishment proportionate to his crimes. But I fear, from what you have yourself described to be his properties, that this will prove impracticable. And thus, while every proper measure is pursued, you should make up your mind to disappointment. That cannot be, but all that I can say will be of little avail. My revenge is of no moment to you. Yet, while I allow it to be a vice, I confess that that it is the devouring and only passion of my soul. My rage is unspeakable when I reflect that the murderer whom I have turned loose upon society still exists. You refuse my just demand, but I have one resource, and I devote myself, either in my life or death, to his destruction. We're almost at the end here, but you just, the guy said he would do the work if he could. You could work with that. But instead what you do is you confess directly to his face that you are going to go and murder this person, like first degree murder. You're confessing to first degree murder. Well, assuming that magistrate thinks of the monster as anything other than an animal, I suppose. I trembled with excess of agitation as I said this. There was a frenzy in my manner, and something, no, I doubt not, of that haughty fierceness which the martyrs of old are said to have possessed. But to a Genevan magistrate, whose mind was occupied by far other ideas than those of devotion and heroism, this elevation of mind had much the appearance of madness. He endeavored to soothe me as a nurse does a child, and reverted to my tale as the effects of delirium. Man, I cried, how ignorant art thou in thy pride of wisdom! Cease, you know not what it is you say. I broke from the house, angry and disturbed, and retired to meditate on some other mode of action. Chapter 24. The final chapter, I believe. My present situation was one in which all voluntary thought was swallowed up and lost. I was hurried away by fury. Revenge alone endowed me with strength and composure. It molded my feelings and allowed me to be calculating and calm at periods when otherwise delirium or death would have been my portion. I drive best when drunk, bro. My first resolution was to quit Geneva forever, my country, which, when I was happy and beloved, was dear to me, now, in my adversity, became hateful. I had provided myself with a sum of money, together with a few jewels which had belonged to my mother, and departed. And now my wanderings began, which are to cease but with life. I have traversed a vast portion of the earth, and have endured all the hardships which travelers in deserts and barbarous countries are wont to meet. How I have lived I hardly know. Many times I have stretched my failing limbs upon the sandy plain and prayed for death, but revenge kept me alive. I dared not die and leave my adversary. I dared not die and leave my enemy in being. That's what it says. It says enemy. I completely mixed up the word. Thought it was an A, but it was an E. My bad. When I quitted Geneva, my first labor was to gain some clue by which I might trace the steps of my fiendish enemy. But my plan was unsettled, and I wandered many hours round the confines of the town, uncertain what path I should pursue. As night approached, I found myself at the entrance of the cemetery where William, Elizabeth, and my father reposed. I entered it and approached the tomb which marked their graves. Everything was silent except the leaves of the trees, which were gently agitated by the wind. The night was nearly dark, and the scene would have been solemn and affecting even to an uninterested observer. The spirits of the departed seemed to flit around and to cast a shadow, which was felt but not seen, around the head of the mourner. I paused too many times in that sentence. This is my reaction to my own reading skills. The deep grief which this scene had at first excited quickly gave way to rage and despair. They were dead, and I lived. Their murderer also lived, and to destroy him I must drag out my weary existence. I knelt on the grass and kissed the earth, and with quivering lips exclaimed, "By the sacred earth on which I kneel, by the shades that wander near me, by the deep and eternal grief that I feel, I swear, and by thee, O night, and the spirits that preside over thee, to pursue the daemon who caused this misery, until he or I shall perish in mortal conflict. For this purpose I will preserve my life. To execute this dear revenge will I again behold the sun and tread the green herbage of earth, which otherwise should vanish from my eyes forever. And I call on you, spirits of the dead, and on you, wandering ministers of vengeance, to aid and conduct me in my work. Let the cursed and hellish monster drink deep of agony. Let him feel the despair that now torments me." It occurs to me, if he wants vengeance, to just kill himself. He is kind of the author of his own misery here. I had begun my adjuration. The cycle of violence is complete. Yeah, kind of. Yeah. This is like a lesson in, this is like the classic lesson in vengeance, right? Vengeance begets vengeance. Classic story. I had begun my adjuration with solemnity, and an awe which almost assured me that the shades of my murdered friends heard and approved my devotion. But the furies possessed me as I concluded, and rage choked my utterance. I was answered through the stillness of night by a loud and fiendish laugh. It rang on my ears long and heavily. The mountains re-echoed it, and I felt as if all hell surrounded me with mockery and laughter. Surely in that moment I should have been possessed by frenzy and have destroyed my miserable existence, but that my vow was heard and that I was reserved for vengeance. The laughter died away, when a well-known and abhorred voice, apparently close to my ear, addressed me in an audible whisper. "I am satisfied, miserable wretch. You have determined to live, and I am satisfied." I darted towards the spot from which the sound proceeded, but the devil eluded my grasp. Suddenly the broad disk of the moon arose and shone full upon his ghastly and distorted shape as he fled with more than mortal speed. I pursued him, and for many months this has been my task. Guided by a slight clue, I followed the windings of the Rhone, but vainly. The blue Mediterranean appeared, and by a strange chance I saw the fiend enter by night and hide himself in a vessel bound for the Black Sea. I took my passage in the same ship, but he escaped, I know not how. He probably just clung to the bottom of the boat. The guy's kind of strong. Amidst the wilds of Tartary and Russia, although he still evaded me, I have ever followed his track. Sometimes the peasants, scared by this horrid apparition, informed me of his path. Sometimes he himself, who feared that if I lost all trace of him I should despair and die, left some mark to guide me. The snows descended on my head, and I saw the print of his huge step on the white plain. To you first entering on life, to whom care is new and agony unknown, how can you understand what I have felt and still feel? Cold, want, and fatigue were the least pains which I was destined to endure. I was cursed by some devil, and carried about with me my eternal hell. Yet still a spirit of good followed and directed my steps, and when I most murmured would suddenly extricate me from seemingly insurmountable difficulties. I don't understand the language in that word. And by word I mean sentence. Sometimes, when nature, overcome by hunger, sank under the exhaustion, a repast was prepared for me in the desert that restored and inspirited me. The fare was, indeed, coarse, such as the peasants of the country ate. Such as the peasants of the country ate, but I will not doubt that it was set there by the spirits that I had invoked to aid me. Or you mean the creature you created? Often, when all was dry, the heavens cloudless, and I was parched by thirst, a slight cloud would bedim the sky, shed the few drops that revived me, and vanish. I followed, when I could, the courses of the rivers, but the daemon generally avoided these, as it was here that the population of the country chiefly collected. In other places human beings were seldom seen, and I generally subsisted on the wild animals that crossed my path. I had money with me and gained the friendship of the villagers by distributing it, or I bought with me some food that I had killed. Or I brought with me some food that I had killed, which, after taking a small part, I always presented to those who had provided me with fire and utensils for cooking. My life, as it passed thus, was indeed hateful to me, and it was during sleep alone that I could taste joy. Oh, blessed sleep! Often, when most miserable, I sank to repose, and my dreams lulled me even to rapture. The spirits that guarded me had provided these moments, or rather hours, of happiness that I might retain strength to fulfill my pilgrimage. Deprived of this respite, I should have sunk under my hardships. During the day I was sustained and inspirited by the hope of night, for in sleep I saw my friends, my wife, and my beloved country. Again I saw the benevolent countenance of my father, heard the silver tones of my Elizabeth's voice, and beheld Clerval, enjoying health and youth. Elizabeth's voice. I think my tongue is slipping. Yeah. Often, when wearied by a toilsome march, I persuaded myself that I was dreaming until night should come, and that I should then enjoy reality in the arms of my dearest friends. He is slipping. What agonizing fondness did I feel for them? How did I cling to their dear forms as sometimes they haunted even my waking hours, and persuade myself that they still lived? At such moments, vengeance that burned within me died in my heart, and I pursued my path towards the destruction of the daemon more as a task enjoined by heaven, as the mechanical impulse of some power which I was unconscious, than as the ardent desire of my soul. Should I get my tongue? Yeah, we should probably service my tongue. Whatever that looks like. See, we are 15 seconds. Well, according to Twitch, we are 10 seconds out. According to Gwen, we're close anyways. We're gonna wait for the ads and then take a little break. Yeah, so according to Twitch, ads are starting soon. According to the warning that Twitch put in chat, they have started. But we know the only reliable source of ad timing is my cat Gwen. My cat Gwen is more reliable at telling us when the ads start than Twitch itself is. Twitch gives us two false answers, which blows my mind, to be perfectly honest. So Victor's kind of slipping. Yeah, Gwen is a good cat. Well, you know, Gwen can be a good cat. She's a curious kitty cat. She now wonders why water doesn't come back out of the sink drain. She's smart for being dumb, but she's cute. Let's finish the story, shall we? What his feelings were whom I pursued, I cannot know. Sometimes, indeed, he left marks in writing on the barks of trees, or cut in stone that guided me, that instigated my fury. My reign is not yet over. These words were legible in one of these inscriptions. You live, and my power is complete. Follow me. I seek the everlasting ices of the north, where you will feel the misery of cold and frost, to which I am impassive. You will find near this place, if you follow not too tardily, a dead hare. Eat and be refreshed. Come on, my enemy. We have yet to wrestle for our lives, but many hard and miserable hours must you endure until that period shall arrive. Scoffing devil. Again I do vow vengeance. Again I do devote the miserable fiend to torture and death. Never will I give up my search until he or I perish. And then, with what ecstasy shall I join my Elizabeth and my departed friends, who even now prepare for me the reward of my tedious toil and horrible pilgrimage. As I still pursued my journey to the northward, the snows thickened and the cold increased in a degree almost too severe to support. The peasants were shut up in their hovels, and only a few of the most hardy ventured forth to seize the animals whom starvation had forced from their hiding places to seek for prey. The rivers were covered with ice, and no fish could be procured, and thus I was cut off from my chief article of maintenance. The triumph of my enemy increased with the difficulty of my labors. One inscription that he left was in these words: "Prepare. Your toils only begin. Wrap yourself in furs and provide food, for we shall soon enter upon a journey where your sufferings will satisfy my everlasting hatred." My courage and perseverance were invigorated by those scoffing words. I resolved not to fail in my purpose, and calling on heaven to support me, I continued with unabated fervor to traverse immense deserts until the ocean appeared at a distance and formed the utmost boundary of the horizon. Oh, how unlike it was to the blue seasons of the south, covered with ice. It was only to be distinguished from land by its superior wildness and ruggedness. The Greeks wept for joy when they beheld the Mediterranean from the hills of Asia, and hailed with rapture the bounty of their toils. I did not weep, but I knelt down, and with a full heart thanked my guiding spirit for conducting me in safety to the place where I hoped, notwithstanding my adversary's jibe, to meet and grapple with him. Some weeks before this period, I had procured a sled, and dogs, and thus traversed the snows with inconceivable speed. I know not whether the fiend possessed the same advantages, but I found that, as before I had daily lost ground in pursuit, I now gained on him, so much so that when I first saw the ocean, he was but 1 day's journey in advance. I'm not sure how you would know that, and I hoped to intercept him before he should reach the beach. With new courage, therefore, I pressed on, and in 2 days arrived at a wretched hamlet on the seashore. I inquired of the inhabitants concerning the fiend, and gained accurate information. A gigantic monster, they said, had arrived the night before, armed with a gun and many pistols, putting to flight the inhabitants of a solitary cottage through fear of his terrific appearance. He had carried off their store of winter food, and, placing it in a sled, to draw which he had seized on a numerous drove of trained dogs, he had harnessed them, and the same night, to the joy of the horror-struck villagers, had pursued his journey across the sea in a direction that led to no land, and they conjectured that he must speedily be destroyed by the breaking of the ice or frozen by the eternal frosts. On hearing this information, I suffered a temporary access of despair. He had escaped me, and I must commence a destructive and almost endless journey across the mountainous ices of the ocean, amidst cold that few of the inhabitants could long endure, and which I, the native of a genial and sunny climate, could not hope to survive. Yet, at the idea that the fiend should live and be triumphant, my rage and vengeance returned, and like a mighty tide, overwhelmed every other feeling. After a slight repose, during which the spirits of the dead hovered around and instigated me to toil and revenge, I prepared for my journey. I exchanged my land sledge. It says sledge, but it's sled, right? Like, we all know that's a dog sled. Stupid words. I exchanged my land sled for one fashioned for the inequalities of the frozen ocean, and purchasing a plentiful stock of provisions, I departed from land. I cannot guess how many days have passed since then, but I have endured misery which nothing but the eternal sentiment of a just retribution burning within my heart could have enabled me to support. Immense and rugged mountains of ice often barred up my passage, and I often heard the thunder of the ground sea, which threatened my destruction. But again the frost came and made the paths of the sea secure. By the quantity of provision which I had consumed, I should guess that I had passed 3 weeks on this journey, and the continual protraction of hope, returning back upon the heart, often wrung bitter drops of despondency and grief from my eyes. Despair had indeed almost secured her prey, and I should soon have sunk beneath this misery. Once, after the poor animals that conveyed me had, with incredible toil, gained the summit of a sloping ice mountain, and one, sinking under his fatigue, died. I viewed the expanse before me with anguish, when suddenly my eye caught a dark speck upon the dusky plain. I strained my sight to discover what it could be, and uttered a wild cry of ecstasy when I distinguished a sled and the distorted proportions of a well-known form within. Oh, with what a burning gush did hope revisit my heart! Warm tears filled my eyes, which I hastily wiped away, that they might not intercept the view that I had of the daemon, but still my sight was dimmed with the burning drops until, giving way to the emotions that oppressed me, I wept aloud. This was not the time for delay. I disencumbered the dogs of their dead companion, gave them a plentiful portion of food, and after an hour's rest, which was absolutely necessary, and yet which was bitterly irksome to me, I continued my route. The sled was still visible, nor did I again lose sight of it except at the moments for when a short time some ice rock concealed it within its intervening crags. I indeed perceptibly gained on it, and when, after nearly 2 days' journey, I beheld my enemy at no more than a mile distant, my heart bounded within me. But now, when I appeared almost within grasp of my foe, my hopes were suddenly extinguished, and I lost all trace of him more utterly than I had ever done before. A ground sea was heard, the thunder of its progress, and the waters rolled and swelled beneath me, became every moment more ominous and terrific. I pressed on, but in vain. The wind arose, the sea roared, and with the mighty shock of an earthquake, it split and cracked with a tremendous and overwhelming sound. The work was soon finished. In a few minutes, a tumultuous sea rolled between me and my enemy, and I was left drifting on a scattered piece of ice that was continually lessened, and thus preparing me for a hideous death. In this manner, many appalling hours passed. Several of my dogs died, and I myself was about to sink under the accumulation of distress when I saw your vessel riding at anchor and holding forth to me the hopes of succor and life. I had no conception that vessels ever came so far north, and was astounded at the sight. I quickly destroyed part of my sled to construct oars, and by these means was enabled with infinite fatigue to move my ice raft in the direction of your ship. I had determined, if you were going southwards, still to trust myself to the mercy of the seas, rather than abandon my purpose. We rescued him. Yeah, should probably have left him there. That's interesting. I'm looking at the viewers list in StreamerBot, Valena, and you just reappeared. So, yeah, Twitch is a liar. Catch and release, toss him back. Yeah, that's a great idea. Let's toss him back. Send him back on his way. He wants to go back, so I don't know why he's on board. I hoped to induce you to grant me a boat with which I could pursue my enemy, but your direction was northwards. You took me on board when my vigor was exhausted, and I should soon have sunk under my multiplied hardships into a death which I still dread, for my task is unfulfilled. Oh, when will my guiding spirit, in conducting me to the daemon, allow me the rest I so much desire, or must I die and he yet live? If I do, swear to me, Walton, that he shall not escape, that you will seek him and satisfy my vengeance in his death. And do I dare to ask of you to undertake my pilgrimage, to endure the hardships that I have undergone? No, I am not so selfish. That's a first. Yet when I am dead, If he should appear, if the ministers of vengeance should conduct him to you, swear that he shall not live. Swear that he shall not triumph over my accumulated woes and survive to add to the list of his dark crimes. He is eloquent and persuasive, and once his words had even power over my heart. But trust him not. His soul is as hellish as his form, full of treachery and fiend-like malice. Hear him not. Call on the names of William, Justine, Clerval, Elizabeth, my father, and of the wretched Victor, and thrust your sword into his heart. I will hover near and direct the steel aright. We can fix him. Walton, in continuation. August 26th, 17-something or other years. I wave my hand whenever I do that. It's 17 -- sometime in the 1700s. You have read this strange and terrific story, Margaret, and do you not feel your blood congeal with horror, like that which even now curdles mine? Sometimes seized with sudden agony, he could not continue his tale, and others, his voice broken, yet piercing, uttered with difficulty the words so replete with anguish. His fine and lovely eyes were now lighted up with indignation, now subdued to downcast sorrow and quenched in infinite wretchedness. Sometimes he commanded his countenance and tones and related the most horrible incidents with a tranquil voice, suppressing every mark of agitation. Then, like a volcano bursting forth, his face would suddenly change to an expression of the wildest rage as he shrieked out imprecations on his persecutor. His tale is connected and told with an appearance of the simplest truth, yet I own to you that the letters of Felix and Sapphi, which he showed me, and the apparition of the monster seen from our ship, brought to me at a greater conviction of the truth of his narrative than his asseverations, however earnest and connected. Such a monster has then really existed. Such a monster has then really existence. Has real existence would have been? Okay. I cannot doubt it, yet I am lost in surprise and admiration. Sometimes I endeavored to gain from Frankenstein the particulars of his creature's formation, but on this point he was impenetrable. Why would you ask how a creature was created? Right? I mean, normally, like, hey, there's a demon running around causing destruction and damage. It's like, okay, that's like a supernatural being. How did he come about? Okay, well, he was summoned or something. Not like, hey, did you make this one? Did you perhaps, maybe steal some bodies from a graveyard and hang them up and put them together? Just asking. Just asking for a friend. Just completely random thought. Are you mad, my friend? Said he. Or whither does your senseless curiosity lead you? Would you also create for yourself and the world a demoniacal enemy? Peace, peace. Learn my miseries and do not seek to increase your own. Frankenstein discovered that I made notes concerning his history. He asked to see them, and then himself corrected and augmented them in many places, but principally in giving the life and spirit to the conversations he held with his enemy. Since you have preserved my narration, said he, I would not that a mutilated one should go down to posterity. Thus has a week passed away. While I have listened to the strangest tale that ever imagination formed, my thoughts and every feeling of my soul have been drunk up by the interest for my guest, which this tale and his own elevated and gentle manners have created. I wish to soothe him, yet can I counsel one so infinitely miserable, so destitute of every hope and consolation to live? Oh no. The only joy that he can now know will be when he composes his shattered spirit to peace and death. Yet he enjoys one comfort, the offspring of solitude and delirium. He believes that when in dreams he holds converse with his friends and derives from that communion consolation for his miseries or excitements to his vengeance. to his vengeance that they are not the creations of his fancy, but the beings themselves who visit him from the reigns of the remote world, the regions of the remote world. This faith gives a solemnity to his reveries that render them to me almost as imposing and interesting as truth. Sorry about their sense of hearing is highly developed. Oh, okay. Oh, dolphin fact. That's what happened. Sense of hearing is highly developed, capable of detecting frequencies far beyond the range of you. So, like dogs, cats. Our conversations are not always confined to his own history and misfortunes. On every point of general literature, he displays unbounded knowledge and a quick and piercing apprehension. His eloquence is forcible and touching, nor can I hear him when he relates a pathetic incident or endeavors to move the passions of pity or love without tears. What a glorious creature must he have been in the days of his prosperity, when he is thus noble and godlike in ruin. He seems godlike. He's a pathetic creature, on like caught up in like his own desperate, delirious need for vengeance on a creature he can't possibly catch or do anything to. He has been fooled into following the creature. The creature knows exactly what it's doing, and he's just such a victim. Anyways, he seems to feel his own worth and the greatness of his fall. Oh, he feels worth, all right. When younger, said he, I believed myself destined for some great enterprise. My feelings are profound. Oh, wow. A raider. Neff the Lorekeeper, welcome to the channel. Thank you very much for visiting and bringing your community here. That is amazing. Valana, can we shout out Neff the Lorekeeper to everyone who is here, which also happens to be the set of people who raided into the channel. I am a fellow reader person indeed. Yes, I am. What did you just do? What were you? Okay, now I have to scroll up. You were my first raid, in fact. Thank you for being my inaugural raid and making me look all over the place for things and stuff. What did you just do? Were you reading? I cannot for the life of me find the bit of information that tells me what you were doing. Oh, you know what? Yeah, do the shadow thingy. That will tell me. You're reading. What were you reading? Did you tell me you're a reading person? Hello, damned it, Dale. Death the Lore Keeper. Thank you. It is my favorite library so far. It's my only library. I do like it. It's just one of the reading rooms, however. Yes. The Norward Builder by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Monday is Mystery Day in my library. Oh, nice. It's good to have a library. Yes. I suppose I should introduce myself. That's what people do, right? Forgive me for my tardiness and ineptness. My name is Sidoen. I am the librarian in this here library that you see. I should. I am brand new. This is still month 2 of streaming for me. It's lots of fun. I like to read. I read on Mondays and Wednesdays. We're just finishing Frankenstein today. We're focusing on a lot of public domain books. I do that because I lived my young adult life, my high school, on the other side of the planet in Australia. And coming back to North America, my wife, Valana here, tells me of all these books that she read in school that I just have never come across. We've read 1984 recently. That was the first novel I read. What an amazing book. And now we're doing Frankenstein. We have to choose another one for Wednesday. I haven't decided yet. Yeah. For like Fridays and Saturdays, I like to play games. We're playing like Space Marine 2 and Dune Awakening. I like sort of the third person shooters and those like survival-esque games, like things like Satisfactory. I've enjoyed Deep Rock Galactic in the past, so I'll get to. That's roughly the timeline I was expecting. Yeah, super new affiliate. Yeah. I had no idea. Like, I was under the impression that fellow readers like wouldn't read into one another. Like the logic being like, if I'm reading a story, and then hey, we're done for the night. What do we do? Oh, jump into a story halfway through. I guess you just do that anyways, right? Because apparently you did. This is very enlightening for me. Thank you for reading and also answering a question at the same time. And yeah, you're right. Our category is tiny. You got to mix in the games. Yeah, yes, Gain. Yes, all the games. Yeah. I do like them solid games. Stompy games. I used to play Mech Warrior Online because it was, well, I was a Mech Warrior fan, or like BattleTech fan. Never really got to play it though, but awesome concept. Very stompy game though. I like the stompy games. Yeah. Oh, tangents. I'm an old man, friend. Tangents is my bedfellow. Just ask Valana. All right. Yeah. Valana's really good at Jackbox. That's cool. We all do our things, right? As long as you're having fun. Yeah, I should do an ad break thing. I normally just break for ads. Like, it kind of feels weird keep reading during ads, like especially at my level, where if I have an audience, they're going to be seeing the ads. So and also I kind of feel like it's a nice courtesy to stop anyhow, and a good opportunity. Get up, walk around, have a drink. You were born looking like a grumpy old man. So, wow, that's an achievement. It's taken me nearly 50 years to do it. So good work, Skiing. You can tick that off your achievement checklist. But we are closing in at the conclusion of the final chapter. So let me continue here. Neff, thank you very much for coming. I know it's common that streamers raid and run. So if you feel the urge to turn it off for the night and do some after stream care, by all means, please do so. Google on Risen TV, sir. That'll give you a bunch of game options that can. Oh, okay. Belana, why don't we copy paste that down somewhere, and we can look into that. Always looking for little things and stuff to add and do. I've been having a blast with StreamerBot, just sort of adding things and stuff and programming this and that, and what some awesome, amazing tools streamers have these days that didn't exist a few years ago. We started watching VTubers when HoloLive EN was about a month old, and oh man, the technology really fascinated me. And things are just there's so much these days that didn't exist back then. Was so blonde that with a full head of hair, it looked like I had a chrome dome. That was part of angry eyebrows. I had a boss once who described his sort of neutral face as resting bitch face. And it bothered not him, but everyone at work that he was in meetings with who didn't really know him very well. Once you get to know him, oh, it's a great guy, he's really friendly. And you just kind of understand that, yeah, that's just what his face looks like. But people get actually worried that he's getting angry at them. Just like random meetings that they don't know him. Yeah, glasses or something. Although glasses with the whole eye tracking is a problem. My eyebrows, I think if I tilt my head up and down a little bit, my eyebrows jump. I think my eyes are okay. VTS's eye tracking with 5000 series NVIDIA cards has been improved. There's some beta drivers that just got upgraded weeks or a month ago, and they do really well now. Damn it, deal. You get to, yeah. Do you ever have, do you have like a thinking habit? Like you have a thinking face, sure, like a kind of screw up your eyebrows or whatever. But do you have like a thinking habit? I will sometimes chew my tongue. It's a concentration one, right? It happens when largely when, like, if I'm playing Space Marines 2, for example, there are some pretty hectic moments, right? And I go real quiet because my entire cognitive capacity is focused on the controller in my hands and noting where the monsters are at all times. There's a reason your model's so cute. Is okay, I gotta go look at your model now. Okay, if I click there and there, I probably won't close the stream. I see. You are a very well kept, cute person. Yes, cute. That's the word I'd use. I'll follow you while I'm here. Baseball dome, what I think. All right, you're like the head scratcher. Fair enough. Fair enough. You're very close to my age. Well, my sympathies, friend. Nice, amazing. Cool. Well, let me finish my stream or my story here, and then you go posting a paragraph. Oh, good lord. It's adorable. I like it. It's very formal, neat, clean. Yeah, I like it. Pop, 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 pop. I'm later and stuck in. All right, it looks like you have a number of facial habits or thinking habits. Proper lore keeper attire. Yes, you may work in my library if you ever desire to, but I feel you are likely busy with your own. Never good at summarizing. Sometimes it's really hard to summarize. That's one of the challenges of writing essays and stuff, right? When you're in high school, they're like, hey, write X number of pages, and you struggle to put it in. And you get into like college or university, they're like, yo, cut it back, only 5 pages or X number of words. And then you suddenly, but you're also given a plethora of information and the ability to research and gain more information that's relevant to what you're trying to say. And all of a sudden, you really have to start commanding the ability to summarize, be concise, and stop putting the fluffy words in that we used to pad out our essays with, right? Yeah. In my job now, I'm like, a quick email's enough, right? Stop asking me for epic tomes of information. Into a 7-minute video. Yeah, I've taken to when I commissioned this background, for example, right? Like when I commissioned this model that I have here, this is actually me. I just sent a picture of me and I described the outfit that I wanted. So if anyone asks what my real face is, well, here you go. This is my real face. Oh man, thank you for all the follows. I jumped quite a few there. You guys are your community is very kind. Kai, Scalen, Creative Garden, and of course Neff yourself. You're very kind. But the background I tried to describe. All right, Kai, have a good night. Thank you for stopping by. Garden's also a reader. Yeah, I guess we stick together, and Kai's a writer. Wow. We are trying to do some writing. I want to build some stories around the library and my lore. I think it'll be fun. Yeah. But the background here, the library, the base image, I tried to describe in words, and the artist I was working with doesn't know English as their principal language, so language is such a barrier sometimes. I sketched it out, but even then, it's a smaller room than I tried to envision. So there's going to be another one at some point. But this is I'm not disappointed. It's a learning process, right? Art looks so different from concept to sketch to colorize to shading. Each step is a new image. It's amazing what they do. About the lore keeper lore. We'll have to keep that in mind. Bye for real, Kai. All right. All right. And I'm going to read for real. Yes. This has been an amazing experience. Thank you for bringing such a comfortable and friendly community. I very much appreciate it. Let's see, where were we? All right, let's back up a paragraph, I guess. Yes, you're welcome to kidnap my stream. It just means the video will be a little longer. Let's see. Our conversations are not always confined to his own history and misfortunes. On every point of general literature, he displays unbounded knowledge and a quick and piercing apprehension. His eloquence is forcible and touching, nor can I hear him when he relates a pathetic incident or endeavors to move the passions of pity or love without tears. Yes, we will shut up and read. Thank you. That'd be very generous. It's very generous. Right, without tears. Oh, what a glorious creature must he have been in the days of his prosperity, when he is thus noble and godlike in ruin. He seems to feel his own worth and the greatness of his fall. Yeah, that's right. And then we commented on how he definitely felt like he was very great. When younger, said he, I believed myself destined for some great enterprise. My feelings are profound, but I possessed a coolness of judgment that fitted me for illustrious achievements. The sentiment of the worth of my nature supported me when others would have been oppressed, for I deemed it criminal to throw away in useless grief those talents that I might be useful to my fellow creatures. When I reflected on the work I had completed, no less a one than the creation of a sensitive and rational animal, I could not rank myself with the herd of common projectors. But this thought, which supported me in the commencement of my career, now serves only to plunge me lower in the dust. All my speculations and hopes are as nothing, and like the archangel who inspired omnipotence, I am chained in an eternal hell. My imagination was vivid, yet my powers of analysis and application were intense. By the union of these qualities, I conceived the idea and executed the creation of a man. Even now, I cannot recollect without passion my reveries while the work was incomplete. I trod heaven in my thoughts, now exulting in my powers, now burning with the idea of their effects. From my infancy I was imbued with high hopes and a lofty ambition, but now I am sunk. Oh, my friend, if you had known me as I once was, you would not recognize me in this state of degradation. Despondency rarely visited my heart. A high density seemed to bear me on until I fell, never to rise again. Must I then lose this admirable being? I have longed for a friend. I have sought one who would sympathize with and love me. Behold, on these desert seas I have found such a one, but I fear I have gained him only to know his value and lose him. I would reconcile him to life, but he repulses the idea. I thank you, Walton, he said, for your kind intentions towards so miserable a wretch. But when you speak of new ties and fresh affections, think you that any can replace those who are gone? Can any man be to me as Clerval was, or any woman another Elizabeth? Even where the affections are not strongly moved by any superior excellence, the companions of our childhood always possess a certain power over our minds which hardly any later friend can obtain. Demonstrably false, by the way, but, Victor's not one for facts. They know our infantile dispositions, which, however they may be afterwards modified, are never eradicated, and they can judge of our actions with more certain conclusions as to the integrity of our motives. A sister or a brother can never, unless indeed such symptoms have been shown early, suspect the other of fraud or false dealing, when another friend, however strongly he may be attached, may, in spite of himself, be contemplated with suspicion. But I enjoyed friends, dear not only through habit and association, but from their own merits. And wherever I am, the soothing voice of my Elizabeth and the conversation of Clerval will be ever whispered in my ear. They are dead, but one feeling in such a solitude can persuade me to preserve my life. If I were engaged in any high undertaking or design, fraught with extensive utility to my fellow creatures, then could I live to fulfill it. But such is not my destiny. I must pursue and destroy the being to whom I gave existence, then my lot on earth will be fulfilled, and I may die. My beloved sister, September 2D, yes, 2nd. I write to you, encompassed by peril and ignorant whether I am ever doomed to see again dear England and the dearer friends that inhabit it. I am surrounded by mountains of ice which admit of no escape and threaten every moment to crush my vessel. How did you send the letter? The brave fellows whom I have persuaded to be my companions look towards me for aid, but I have none to bestow. There is something terribly appalling in our situation, yet my courage and hopes do not desert me. It is terrible to reflect that the lives of all these men are endangered through me. If we are lost, my mad schemes are the cause. And what, Margaret, will be the state of your mind? You will not hear of my destruction, and you will anxiously await my return. Years will pass, and you will have visitings of despair, and yet be tortured by hope. Oh, my beloved sister, the sickening failing of your heartfelt expectations is, in prospect, more terrible to me than my own death. But you have a husband and lovely children. You may be happy. You may be happy. Heaven bless you and make you so. My unfortunate guest regards me with the tenderest compassion. He endeavors to fill me with hope and talks as if life were a possession which he valued. He reminds me how often the same accidents have happened to other navigators who have attempted the sea. And in spite of myself, he fills me with cheerful auguries. Even the sailors feel the power of his eloquence. When he speaks, they no longer despair. He rouses their energies, and when they hear his voice, they believe these vast mountains of ice are molehills which will vanish before the resolutions of man. These feelings are transitory. Each day of expectation delayed fills them with fear, and I almost dread a mutiny caused by this despair. September 5th. A scene has just passed of such uncommon interest that, although it is highly probable that these papers may never reach you, yet I cannot forbear recording it. We are still surrounded by mountains of ice, still in imminent danger of being crushed in their conflict. The cold is excessive, and many of my unfortunate comrades have already found a grave amidst this scene of desolation. Frankenstein has daily declined in health. A feverish fire still glimmers in his eyes, but he is exhausted, and when suddenly roused to any exertion, he speedily sinks again into apparent lifelessness. The number of times that fellow has had a fever, you think he'd be immune by now. Exercise his fever muscle. I mentioned in my last letter the fears I entertained of a mutiny. This morning, as I sat watching the wan countenance of the waning countenance of my friend, his eyes half closed and his limbs hanging listlessly, I was roused by half a dozen of the sailors, who demanded admission into the cabin. They entered, and their leader addressed me. He told me that he and his companions had been chosen by the other sailors to come in deputation to me to make me a requisition which, in justice, I could not refuse. We were immured in ice and should probably never escape, but they feared that if, as was possible, the ice should dissipate and a free passage be opened, I should be rash enough to continue my voyage and lead them into fresh dangers after they might happily have surmounted this. They insisted, therefore, that I should engage with a solemn promise that if the vessel should be freed, I would instantly direct my course southwards. This speech troubled me. I had not despaired, nor had I yet conceived the idea of returning if set free. Yet I could, in justice, or even in possibility, refuse this demand. I hesitated before I answered. When Frankenstein, who had at first been silent, and indeed appeared hardly to have force enough to attend, now roused himself, his eyes sparkled, and his cheeks flushed with momentary vigor, turning towards the men, he said, "What do you mean? What do you demand of your captain? Are you then so easily turned from your design? Did you not call this a glorious expedition? And wherefore was it glorious? Not because the way was smooth and placid as a southern sea, but because it was full of dangers and terror, because at every new incident your fortitude was to be called forth and your courage exhibited, because danger and death surrounded it, and these you were too brave to overcome. These you were too brave and overcome. It's the wrong two. For this was it a glorious, and this was it an honorable undertaking. You were hereafter to be hailed as the benefactors of your species, your names adored as belonging to brave men who encountered death for honor and the benefit of mankind. And now, behold, with the first imagination of danger, or, if you will, the first mighty and terrific trial of your courage, you shrink away and are content to be handed down as men who had not strength enough to endure cold and peril, and so, poor souls, they were chilly and returned to their warm firesides. Why, that requires not this preparation. Ye need not have come this far and dragged your captain to the shame and of a defeat merely to prove yourselves cowards. Oh, be men, or be more than men. Be steady to your purposes and firm as a rock. This ice is not made of such stuff as your hearts may be. It is mutable and cannot withstand you many flubs. It is mutable and cannot withstand you if you say that it shall not. Do not return to your families with the stigma of disgrace marked on your brows. Return as heroes who have fought and conquered and who know not what it is to turn their backs on the foe. He spoke this with a voice so modulated to the different feelings expressed in his speech, with an eye so full of lofty design and heroism, that you can wonder that these men were moved. Can you wonder that these men were moved? I am working on intonation and inclination quite a bit. They looked at one another and were unable to reply. I spoke. I told them to retire and consider of what had been said, that I would not lead them farther north if they strenuously desired the contrary, but that I hoped that, with reflection, their courage would return. They retired, and I turned towards my friend, but he was sunk in languor and almost deprived of life. Well, yeah, that's the most animated he's been in, 24 chapters. Yeah. How all this will terminate, I know not, but I had rather die than return shamefully my purpose unfulfilled. Yet I fear such will be my fate. The men, supported by ideas of glory and honor, can never willingly continue to endure their present hardships. Thank you for the follow, Brissy. September 7th. The die is cast. I have consented to return if we are not destroyed. Thus are my hopes blasted by cowardice and indecision. I come back ignorant and disappointed. It requires more philosophy than I possess to bear this injustice with patience. September 12th. It is past. I am returning to England. I have lost my hopes of utility and glory. I have lost my friend. But I will endeavor to detail these bitter circumstances to you, my dear sister, and while I am wafted towards England and towards you, I will not despond. September 9th, the ice began to move, and roarings like thunder were heard at a distance as the island split and cracked in every direction. We were in the most imminent peril, but as we could only remain passive, my chief attention was occupied by my unfortunate guest, whose illness increased in such a degree that he was entirely confined to his bed. The ice cracked behind us and was driven with force towards the north. A breeze sprang from the west, and on the 11th the passage towards the south became perfectly free. When the sailors saw this, and that their return to their native country was apparently assured, a shout of tumultuous joy broke from them, loud and long continued. Frankenstein, who was dozing, awoke and asked the cause of the tumult. "They shout," I said, "because they will soon return to England." "Do you, then, really return?" "Alas," I said, "I cannot withstand their demands. I cannot lead them unwillingly to danger, and I must return." "Do so, if you will, but I will not. You may give up your purpose, but mine is assigned to me by heaven, and I dare not. I am weak, but surely the spirits who assist my vengeance will endow me with sufficient strength." Saying this, he endeavored to spring from the bed, but the exertion was too great for him. He fell back and fainted. Oh dear, you can't let him leave the boat. It was long. I am strong and mighty, can't get up. Alright, we're just going to give you a boat, set you on the ice, see you later. He'll be fine. It was long before he was restored, and I often thought that life was entirely extinct. At length he opened his eyes, he breathed with difficulty, and was unable to speak. The surgeon gave him a composing draught, and ordered us to leave him undisturbed. In the meantime, he told me that my friend had certainly not many hours to live. His sentence was pronounced, and I could only grieve and be patient. I sat by his bed, watching him. His eyes were closed, and I thought he slept. But presently he called to me in a feeble voice, and bidding me come near, he said, "Alas, the strength I relied on is gone. I feel that I shall soon die, and he, my enemy, the persecutor, may still be in being. Think not, Walton, that in the last moments of my existence I feel that burning hatred and ardent desire of revenge I once expressed, but I feel myself justified in desiring the death of my adversary." Adversary. Man, I look at that word. Adversary. Adversary. Thank you, good Lord. My brain is doing a trick where it doesn't want to say that. Adversary. No, we're moving on. My enemy. During these last days, I have been occupied in examining my past conduct, nor do I find it blamable. In a fit of enthusiastic madness, I created a rational creature and was bound towards him to assure, as far as was in my power, his happiness and well-being. This was my duty, but there was another still paramount to that. My duties towards the beings of my own species had greater claims to my attention because they included a greater proportion of happiness or misery. Urged by this view, I refused, and I did right. Oh, Harry knows. And I did right in refusing to create a companion for the first creature. He showed unparalleled malignity and selfishness in evil. He destroyed my friends. He devoted to destruction beings who possessed exquisite sensations, happiness, and wisdom. Nor do I know where this thirst for vengeance may end. Miserable himself that he may render no other wretched, he ought to die. The task of his destruction was mine, but I have failed. When actuated by selfish and vicious motives, I ask you to undertake my unfinished work, and I renew this request now, when I am only induced by reason and virtue. I promise I have good reasons. Adversary. It's sorry, though, but that's, yeah, adversary. There you go. Yeah, English is no language. It's 3 languages in a trench coat that hides in the dark alleys among other languages. That's so apt. Thank you. It's fine. I love to read grand and cool sounding words, and then earlier this stream I mispronounced busy as bussy, like truer words, yeah. Yeah, my mouth picks interesting times to mess up. And some words I don't even recognize. Go ye old language. Yet I cannot ask you to renounce your country and friends to fulfill this task, and now that you are returning to England, you will have little chance of meeting with them. But the consideration of these points, and the well-balancing of that you may esteem your duties, of what you may esteem your duties, I leave to you. My judgment and ideas are already disturbed by the near approach of death. I dare not ask you to do what I think right, for I may still be misled by passion. That he should live to be an instrument of mischief disturbs me. In other respects, this hour, when I momentarily expect my release... Okay, controlling burp. There we go. When I momentarily expect my release is the only happy one which I have enjoyed for several years. The forms of the beloved dead flit before me, and I hasten to their arms. Farewell, Walton. Seek happiness in tranquility and avoid ambition, even if it be only the apparently innocent one of distinguishing yourself in science and discoveries. Yet why do I say this? I have myself been blasted in these hopes. Yet another may succeed. His voice became fainter as he spoke, and at length, exhausted by his effort, he sank into silence. About half an hour afterwards, he attempted again to speak, but was unable. He pressed my hand feebly, and his eyes closed forever, while the irradiation of a gentle smile passed away from his lips. Margaret, what comment can I make on the untimely extinction of this glorious spirit? What can I say that will enable you to understand the depth of my sorrow? All that I should express would be inadequate and feeble. My tears flow, my mind is overshadowed by a cloud of disappointment, but I journey towards England, and I may there find consolation. I am interrupted. What do these sounds portend? Is it midnight? The breeze blows fairly, and the watch on deck scarcely stir. Again, there is a sound as of a human voice, but hoarser. It comes from the cabin where the remains of Frankenstein still lie. I must arise and examine. Good night, my sister. Great God! What a scene has just taken place. I am yet dizzy with the remembrance of it. I hardly know whether I shall have the power to detail it, yet the tale which I have recorded would be incomplete without this final and wonderful catastrophe. I entered the cabin where lay the remains of my ill-fated and admirable friend. Over him hung a form which I cannot find words to describe, gigantic in stature, yet uncouth and distorted in its proportions. As he hung over the coffin, his face was concealed by long locks of ragged hair, but one vast hand was extended in color and apparent texture like that of a mummy. When he heard the sound of my approach, he ceased to utter exclamations of grief and horror and sprung towards the window. Never did I behold a vision so horrible as his face, of such a loathsome yet appalling hideousness. I shut my eyes involuntarily and endeavored to recollect what were my duties with regard to this destroyer. I called on him to stay. Hang around, I want to kill you. He paused, looking on me with wonder, and again turned towards the lifeless form of his creator. He seemed to forget my presence, and every feature and gesture seemed instigated by the wildest rage of some uncontrollable passion. That is also my victim, he exclaimed. In his murder, my crimes are consummated. The miserable series of my being is wound to its close. O Frankenstein, generous and self-devoted being, what does it avail that I ask thee to pardon me? I, who irretrievably destroyed thee by destroying all thou lovest. Alas, he is cold. He cannot answer me. His voice seemed suffocated, and my first impulses, which had suggested to me the duty of obeying the dying request of my friend in destroying his enemy, were now suspended in a mixture of curiosity and compassion. I approached this tremendous being. I dared not again raise my eyes to his face. There was something so scaring and unearthly in his ugliness. I attempted to speak, but the words died away on my lips. The monster continued to utter wild and incoherent self-reproaches. Length I gathered resolution to address him in a pause of the tempest of his passion. All right. We are going to have ads imminently. So we are going to pause for those. So even Twitch, I've now gotten into the habit of waiting for Twitch to say, yeah, their ads are starting soon before I bother stopping the read, because this always takes a hot minute. Gwen here will tell us the truth. It's good to have cats in your chat. Be your moderators. That's what I say. And yet maybe I should have more timers. It feels like forever to wait for this. Oh, maybe here we go. All right, we'll be back. All right. He's addressing the monster. Your repentance, I said, is now superfluous. If you had listened to the voice of consciousness and heeded the stings of remorse before you had urged your diabolical vengeance to this extremity, Frankenstein would yet have lived. And do you dream, said the daemon, do you think that I was then dead to agony and remorse? He continued, pointing to the corpse, he suffered not in the consummation of the deed. Oh, not the 10,000th portion of the anguish that was mine endured the lingering detail of its execution. A frightful selfishness hurried me on, while my heart was poisoned with remorse. Think you that the groans of Clerval were music to my ears? My heart was fashioned to be susceptible of love and sympathy, and when wrenched by misery to vice and hatred, it did not endure the violence of the change without torture such as you cannot even imagine. Everyone's the victim. After the murder of Clerval, I returned to Switzerland, heartbroken and overcome. I pitied Frankenstein. My pity amounted to horror. I abhorred myself. But when I discovered that he, the author at once of my existence and of its unspeakable torments, dared to hope for happiness, that while he accumulated wretchedness and despair upon me, he sought his own enjoyment in feelings and passions from the indulgence of which I was forever barred, then impotent envy and bitter indignation filled me with an insatiable thirst for vengeance. I recollected my threat and resolved that it should be accomplished. I knew that I was preparing for myself a deadly torture, but I was the slave, not the master, of an impulse which I detested yet could not disobey. Yet when she died, nay, then I was not miserable. I had cast off all feeling, subdued all anguish, to riot in the excess of my despair. Evil thenceforth became my good. Urged thus far, I had no choice but to adapt my nature to an element which I had willingly chosen. The completion of my demoniacal design became an insatiable passion, and now it is ended. There is my last victim. I was at first touched by the expressions of his misery. Yet when I called to mind what Frankenstein had said of his powers of eloquence and persuasion, and when I again cast my eyes on the lifeless form of my friend, indignation was rekindled within me. Wretch, I said, it is well that you come here to whine over the desolation that you have made. You throw a torch into a pile of buildings, and when they are consumed, you sit among the ruins and lament the fall. Hypocritical fiend! If he whom you mourn still lived, still would he be the object. Again would you become the prey of your accursed vengeance. It is not pity that you feel. You lament only because the victim of your malignity is withdrawn from your power. Oh, it is not thus, interrupted the being. Yet such must be the impression conveyed to you by what appears to be the purport of my actions. Yet I seek not a fellow feeling in my misery. No sympathy may I ever find. When I first sought it, it was the love of virtue, the feelings of happiness and affection with which my whole being overflowed, that I wished to be participated. But now that virtue has become to me a shadow, and that happiness and affection are turned into bitter and loathing despair, in what should I seek for sympathy? I am content to suffer alone while my suffering shall endure. When I die, I am well satisfied that abhorrence and opprobrium should load my memory. Once my fancy was soothed with dreams of virtue and of fame and of enjoyment. Once I falsely hoped to meet with beings who, pardoning my outward form, would love me for the excellent qualities which I was capable of unfolding. I was nourished with high thoughts of honor and devotion, but now crime has degraded me beneath the meanest animal. No guilt, no mischief, no malignity, no misery can be found comparable to mine. When I run over the frightful catalogue of my sins, I cannot believe that I am the same creature whose thoughts were once filled with sublime and transcendent visions of the beauty and the majesty of goodness. But it is even so, the fallen angel becomes the malignant devil. Yet even that enemy of God and man had friends and associates in his desolation. I am alone. You, who call Frankenstein your friend, seem to have a knowledge of my crimes and his misfortunes. But in the detail which he gave you of them, he could not sum up the hours and months of misery which I endured, wasting in impotent passions. For while I destroyed his hopes, I did not satisfy my own desires. They were forever ardent and craving. Still I desired love and fellowship, and I was still spurned. Was there no injustice in this? Am I to be thought the only criminal when all humankind sinned against me? Why do you not hate Felix, who drove his friend from his door with contumely? A dog fact. Oh, Dachshunds, I'm sorry I said that wrong, were originally bred to fight badgers. Ooh, that's a rough gig. You don't want to fight badgers. Why do you not hate Felix, who drove his friend from his door with contumely? Dachshunds, yeah, thank you, that's better. Why do you not excrete the rustic who sought to destroy the savior of his child? Execrate. Interesting. Never heard that word. Nay, these are virtuous and immaculate beings. I, the miserable and the abandoned, am an abortion, to be spurned at, and kicked and trampled on. Even now my blood boils at the recollection of this injustice. But it is true that I am a wretch. I have murdered the lovely and helpless. I have strangled the innocent as they slept, and grasped to death his throat who never injured me or any other living thing. I have devoted my creator, the select specimen of all that is worthy of love and admiration among men, to misery. I have pursued him even to that irredeemable ruin. There he lies, white and cold in death. You hate me, but your abhorrence cannot equal that with which I regard myself. I look on the hands which executed the deed. I think on the heart in which the imagination of it was conceived, and long for the moment when these hands will meet my eyes, when that imagination will haunt my thoughts no more. Fear not that I shall be the instrument of future mischief. My work is nearly complete. Neither yours nor any man's death is needed to consummate the series of my being and accomplish that which must be done. But it requires my own. Do not think that I should be slow to perform this sacrifice. I shall quit your vessel on the ice raft, which brought me thither, and shall seek the most northern extremity of the globe. I shall collect my funeral pile and consume to ashes this miserable frame. That it remains my afford. that it remains may afford no light to any curious and unhallowed wretch who would create such another as I have been. I shall die. I shall no longer feel the agonies which now consume me, or be the prey of feelings unsatisfied, yet unquenched. He is dead who called me into being, and when I shall be no more, the very remembrance of us both will speedily vanish. I shall no longer see the sun or stars, or feel the winds play on my cheeks. Light, feeling, and sense will pass away, and in this condition must I find my happiness. Some years ago, when the images which this world affords first opened upon me, when I felt the cheering warmth of summer and heard the rustling of leaves and the warbling of the birds, and these were all to me, I should have wept to die. Now it is my only consolation. Polluted by crimes and torn by the bitterest remorse, where can I find rest but in death? Farewell. I leave you, and in you the last of humankind whom these eyes will ever behold. Farewell, Frankenstein. If thou wert yet alive and yet cherished a desire of revenge against me, it would be better satiated in my life than in my destruction. But it was not so. Thou didst seek my extinction, that I might not cause greater wretchedness. And if yet in some mode unknown to me thou hadst not ceased to think and feel, thou wouldst not desire against me a vengeance greater than that which I feel. Blasted as thou wert, my agony was still superior to thine, for the bitter sting of remorse will not cease to rankle in my wounds until death shall close them forever. But soon, he cried with sad and solemn enthusiasm, I shall die, and what I feel be no longer felt. Soon these burning miseries will be extinct. I shall ascend my funeral pile triumphantly and exult in the agony of the torturing flames. The light of that conflagration will fade away. My ashes will be swept into the sea by the winds. My spirit will sleep in peace, or if it thinks, it will not surely think thus. Farewell. He sprang from the cabin window as he said this, upon the ice raft which lay close to the vessel. He was soon borne away by the waves and lost in the darkness and distance. That concludes Frankenstein. Everybody dies. I was kind of starting to suspect that was going to happen. Like, channel. It will put a marker in my video file. And they all lived happily ever after? No, Valana, I don't think so. Hello, Miss Shadow. Miss Shadow 69, hellos. How are you doing? Thank you for the visit. Yeah. Okay is a good start. I think we're well. We're certainly doing better than the characters in the story of Frankenstein, that's for sure. Holy cow. We have in a few weeks, how long is it, Valana? We actually took the week of Canadian Thanksgiving off. So I might do like extra streams there, probably gaming streams. Fantasy, like Shifter Fantasy, 3 weeks. I'm not opposed to fantasy. I think what we read so far seriously is 1984, now Frankenstein. We did some children's tales, so like the Grimm's Fairies, some of those. That's technically fantasy. We've read Edgar Allan Poe. But yeah, fantasy. Yeah, on stream is public domain stuff. That's kind of one of the limits. We have optimistically sent the license holders for Dune a request to read on stream. I would love to read the Dune books. I have never read them. That would be pretty sweet, pretty awesome. We do have a list of books to start. What do we got here? I haven't chosen the next book yet. list. There's can't get rejected if you don't ask. That's right. Hey, you can always ask. It might take them 6 months to answer, but you know, maybe they'll say yes, or maybe they'll say, "Hey, give us $100,000 for licensing permissions," and then I'll say no. That might happen. Yeah, Jekyll and Hyde or Dracula. It is the month of October soon, so starting to think maybe some of the classic horrors are like appropriate. We do have like the Legend of Sleepy Hollows in there too. Beowulf. Yeah. Miss Shadow, if you have public domain recommendations that sit in the fantasy category that you would be interested in listening to, I am not closed to suggestions. Yeah, Sleepy Hollow's in here too, right? So in the list, the current list that you have provided. The War of the Worlds. I want to read that. God, that's an ancient story. I remember watching a series called War of the Worlds when I was younger. Very younger. Yeah, or authors that would be open to giving permissions. I'm always open for authors who would like to issue permissions, either for free or a fee. I don't mind paying small fees for permissions. That's not out of the question. Just knowing what you read, yeah. You've written it also. I haven't done much writing, but it's something I want to do a little bit of. Valana's done some has done some writing. So yeah, I used to love when I was younger, like the Forgotten Realms stories. So all the D&D stuff. I read that. Things like the Dragons of Pern stuff. Oh, you're published on Amazon. Well, congratulations. That's awesome. That's amazing. You're open to helping? Like, in what regard? You're gonna help me get permission to read Dune? That'd be good. What's your project? Oh, if I want to write stuff, I'm not writing stuff right now. I'm actually quite extremely busy. I have a full-time job, and I fit streams around that time. And my time right now is actually really consumed with still setting up things and stuff here and there, adopting ideas and doing other things. But yeah, I already have a small list of stories that I want to write that I haven't even been able to get started, and I have other obligations to another group of friends who need something done too. And you want to do a challenge when a few authors get together to write a series together. That sounds great. When I was younger, like let's say 25 years younger, I was a teenager. My nickname at that time was Disaster. It was my very first 15-year-old's nickname on the internet. Very young name. Disaster. I had a website. I was playing around with, what was it? Dream something. It was a website editor. And I was getting into things like, buttons and stuff. But I developed a website called Disasters Fanfic. It was a review site. I read tons of fan fiction, and then I would critique it. And I had something called Disasters Challenge. After I got accustomed to how an author wrote their fan fiction, I would send them a message saying, "Hey," in and amongst all like the grammar corrections and spelling checks and whatnot, I said, "Hey, I noticed you write in this style a lot. Would you accept a challenge to write in a style that's sort of outside your comfort zone?" And quite a few authors would accept that challenge, and it was a lot of fun. Shadow is yours since you were since yeah. It's interesting. The nickname I have now, Sidoen, is actually a derivative that has come from disaster through several morphs or transitions, if you will. That all it's technically related. So it's a connection through time, really, I suppose. Miss Shadow. There you go. There you go. You two have older nicknames than I do. Little to no dialogue, like the equivalent of a silent film, perhaps. Oh, you know what that reminds me of? You know the sort of 3D series, the Astartes on YouTube. It's a Space Marine thing. It was a fan creation of Space Marines going through. It was a couple of short episodes, no dialogue, all atmosphere, all demonstrating like the power of the Space Marine, the cooperation, the perfect execution of missions, and the very like they used a lot of like very sudden G-force switches, like the rushes and sudden stops, and just it's a really fascinating style, really entertaining. But it's very much it's no dialogue. It's everything is a look, or more often than not, there was the occasional close up of an eye, which was really cool. The one of the moves that gets stuck in a psychic field or something. Really, really well done, put together. Kidnapped and sent to an island back in prehistoric times by themselves as a test subject. Oh, okay, that's a pretty common story. Well, not common. It's like you hear that every so often, right? It's a survival challenge, a survival story. Prehistoric times. That covers, so prehistory, as I understand it, are times before we recorded history, either like written or orally, and so it covers a lot of ground. So how far back in time are we talking? like like dinosaurs or cavemen, or as the earth was forming? That might be a little too far. Your story will end very quickly. Transported back in time, flattened by asteroid. One paragraph story. That's a short story for you. Okay, so there's a variety of times. Okay, so that gives each author sort of their own sandbox to work in. That's interesting. Cool. Cool. Okay. I'm going to wrap up though. Thank you everyone for coming. I don't know what I'm going to read on Wednesday. This is concluded to be one of the books in the book list here. We've kind of covered a few of those. Oh, that scared me. Thank you very much for scaring me. Thank you for the follow. Oh, you draw too. Yeah, that's the closest to art I get is messing around in GIMP a little bit and doing my best to use public domain art sources or really badly drawn stick figures. Yeah, so for Wednesday we will pick a new story and we will start from there. It'll probably be another novel start. So we will do another long book instead of short stories. We'll get back to those eventually. Echoes of the Sacred Territory on Amazon. Oh, okay. You do that cover. Fernanda, you want to copy that title down and go look at that? See what it's about. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So Wednesday, reading stream. And Fridays and Sundays back to playing Dune. Dune Awakened. We are progressing through the Iron Age of my gameplay. Thank you everyone for coming. Amazing. We were rated for the first time tonight. Thank you, Neff the Lore Keeper. And your community is lovely and kind. I very much appreciate the attention. Yeah, I guess we're gonna raid a writer this evening. Let's do that. What do we have? Similar, same category. Tales of a Dying Earth by Jack Vance. It's a pumpkin head. We can do that. Let's read this fellow. Intended for certain audiences. Okay, cool. All right. Oh. Before you depart, please remember to return your reading materials to the shelves, and remember to be kind to one another.